Yeah. So those of you who are in already, I'll repeat this later, we are going to record this session because we're going to be using it as part of the consultation response that comes from this workshop tonight, that will go from us directly to Scottish Government. So, and I will say again a little bit later, if there's anything you say that wants to be off record, then please do say you want it to be off record. And if you don't want yourself to be recorded, then that's absolutely fine to keep the camera off. I think we'll leave it till about 5 past, and then just give people time to get a cup of tea, or people have just finished work, no doubt running back and forth to join on this. So. While you're waiting, I'll put it in the chat box, and again, I'll repeat it later. We're going to be using a little bit of technology to get some live responses from you while we're actually on the workshop. So we're going to use a piece of software also on your website, actually, called Mentimeter. So if you're able to use your phone, it works best on your phone, and go to menti.com, as I put in the chat box, and then it'll ask you for a code, and then at that point, we'll be asking you some questions as we go through. We'll use this a couple of times, but it just gives us a little bit, makes it a little bit more like we're all sat together. If you can't use Mentimeter for whatever reason, or you don't want to, then if we're asking questions, we'll share it on the screen and you can see them. You can just put your responses in the chat box. Okay. Fab. I think we'll probably kick off if that's all right with everybody. We'll sort of people just come in as they come in. So welcome to this workshop. This is part of a series of workshops that are taking place right across Scotland over the next few weeks or so. It's all in response of Scottish Government's local food strategy consultation called Local Food for Everyone. And what we're trying to do, we're working in conjunction with Scottish Government here at Nourish Scotland to ensure that everybody that can has an opportunity to be involved in the consultation and to really get a sense of what people feel local food means to them where they live. Okay, because whilst this is a national local food strategy, this affects us differently, and how we might see local food living in an island community or living in Glasgow or living in a rural community in the mainland is very, very different. And so it's very important for it that we can try and bring these together. A little bit of meeting etiquette before we get here. Again, we've all been in these kind of meetings for the last year and a half, but just to remember, please, if you can, add your name and where you're from by renaming yourself in your little screen. That'd be great. That's in the top right. We are going to be recording, as I've said. All of the outputs from this workshop will go directly to Scottish Government. So that's the Mentimeter, the chat box, our conversations, the Jamboards, which we'll be using in the discussion groups will be there. So please be aware of that. This is your opportunity to engage with Scottish Government on this particularly, I think, important subject. But also, should you want to say something that feels personal at the moment to say because we're having these conversations, that will be kept within these rooms. Okay, so just make that clear. We're all experts, but we're all learning. So please do take on people's sort of their comments in that light. And for people who've just joined, if you can also use Menti, which we'll put in the chat box here. If you can go to your phone, that's great. It's a website which allows us to take some live responses as we're going through. If you can't use Menti, absolutely fine. Just stick any of your thoughts in the chat box. Again, the chats will be going as part of this consultation response. So the objective of this workshop, which is one of around 20 that are happening across Scotland, is to really think about what we want in terms of a local food strategy for Scotland. Now, it's going to give you the opportunity to explore that in lots of different ways. And for those of you who have read the consultation document, it's not going to be following the same questions it asks in the consultation document, okay? The reason for that is we really wanted to break it down a little bit more and think about what local food means in lots of different contexts. But just rest assured that Scottish Government have just in the point of appointing an analysis team who will be taking what we talk about here and transferring that and overlaying it onto the consultation. So nothing's going to get lost. A couple of things I just wanted to say is, firstly, the consultation has now been extended from the 26th of November to the 2nd of December. That just got made public today. So we've got a little bit of time after this workshop to be working on it. And I think something really, really important to think about is that the reason we're all here and we're involved in the things that we do is that we know that there are problems with the food system, not just locally, but nationally and internationally. However, let's use this time to really think about the positives and the opportunities, because if we just spend the rest of the time just talking about how bad it is, we're not going to use the opportunity to think about how good it could be. So really, this is about us thinking about positives and turning those into some very specific asks that we can give to Scottish Government, okay? The workshop will last approximately 90 minutes. And as I say, we're going to be using these various tools to gauge people's thoughts. So we're going to start with that now. So as I say, we've got Menti here, and I'm going to share my screen, and you should be able to see what people have been putting up on Menti. So people have already started putting their sort of thoughts in there, and you can see at the bottom right is the number of people who have participated so far on these questions. So we just wanted to get you in the swing of this by asking you 3 questions. I feel good today. I disagree. I strongly disagree. There's plenty of local food where I live, and local food is accessible to everyone. And that's kind of the crux of what we're talking about. Is local food is accessible to everyone. That's what the local food strategy is asking about. I'm not seeing particularly much confidence in the fact that local food is accessible to everyone. Do feel free if you've got any thoughts about why that might be the case. That'd be interesting for us to hear. So if I kind of hover over here, so 7 of the people on here so far, and so 10 thinking it's not accessible to everyone at all. Anybody have any thoughts around why that might be the case? I can't see all of your faces in a minute, so do feel free to kind of just jump in should you have a thought. A few more people coming in now. Sarah, I don't know if it's possible for you to just share my last message about Menti into the chat. That would be fantastic. Thank you. I'm pleased to see that most people are feeling good, though. That's pretty good. Okay, great. So this is a bit of a test to make sure everybody can get on. If you've got any problems accessing this, then as I say, then please do put something in the chat box. That's absolutely fine. Okay, great. Welcome to everyone who's just turned up. Just reading what's happened in the chat box. Okay, great. So a little bit of background on this consultation. So this consultation is actually sitting alongside a whole bunch of other things. I think Scottish Government at the minute, because it's within the first 100 days of government, are on consultation overdrive. There's consultations for everything at the minute. And I think it's really interesting that this consultation is sitting alongside some other very, very important ones. So one of them is the agricultural transition consultation, which looks around what we should be doing to replace the common agricultural policy. Now we're no longer with Europe. But you can't really think about any of these without thinking about the others at the same time. So how we replace the common agricultural policy will really feed into the money that's available and the resources available to look at local food. But if you look at local food, you can't then not think about things like the health and social care consultation or the ending food banks consultation, because they all feed in together. So it tends to be, as always happens, these are siloed, but they're all interlinked. So as we go through, do think about this, you know, how we look at agriculture in general will have an impact on how we do local food, will have an impact on how we have Scottish food in things like our public institutions, our schools, our prisons, you know, and all of this affects things along the way. So this isn't just sitting in kind of in a silo on its own. So the consultation itself looks at 3 pillars, and you'll see that if you look at the response. One is connecting food with people. One is connecting Scottish producers with buyers. One is about harnessing public sector procurement. And then there's this random curveball in there, which is about vertical farming. The vertical farming part of it is a little bit unfortunate, and we've spoken to the Scottish Government about this. It was just that it wasn't necessarily, didn't have another place to consult about it. So do keep it in mind as we go through, but it's not necessarily talking about local food per se. It's just talking about one of the other technologies that may be used in order to extend our growing seasons and to give us some of the vegetables or the fruits or the leaves that we want to see. And so I'll leave you to make your own judgment about that. And I believe in one of the discussion groups, someone will perhaps raise that. So as I say, the way we'll talk about this today is not going to follow the exact questioning of these 3 pillars in the consultation. We'll be using some different questions. But what is local food? I think, again, it's important to not let us get so bogged down in the word local, because, for example, a community grower may think about local food being within 5 miles of where they're growing their food. But then if you look at Scottish policy, Scotland Food and Drink talk about local food as anything within Scotland. So I don't want us to get bogged down in that, because again, that's another like 17-hour conversation. Think about, in this workshop, local food means food that is going to have a benefit to the communities, the economies and the environment of Angus and Dundee, or indeed Tayside, if that's the way you want to look at it. So again, let's not get bogged down on what we mean by local. But why is local food important? So again, we're going to go over to Menti now, and I'm going to move on to a different slide. So please go back to your phones. And what I'd like you to do is just give me some words that you feel are, that mean that why local food is important to you. Okay? So what you'll do is, as you enter some thoughts onto your phone, you'll see these words coming up on the screen. And then the bigger the word is, the more times people have actually written it. It's called a word cloud. People obviously have seen that. So again, as I say, if it's not something you're able to use, if Menti isn't something you feel comfortable with, or it's not something you can access, then please don't worry too much and put it in the chat box. Okay, they're starting to come in now. Fresh is very big in the middle. That's interesting. Authentic. What do we mean by authentic? Anybody who put authentic in there, what does that mean? You're all muted, by the way, so if you do want to speak up, then you'll have to unmute yourself. But please don't leave it just to me to speak, because it gets incredibly boring. Okay, still fresh is right in the middle there. That's interesting. So we're saying that local food is fresher than other food that may have come from a distance. Okay, so pesticides. Again, I don't want to make any call what people mean by that, but does local food automatically mean it is free of pesticides? Okay, food miles. People coming in. Okay. Brilliant. So sustainable is right at the heart of there. I think sustainable is one of those words that gets owned sometimes, misappropriated. What do we mean by sustainable? I haven't seen a particular definition that sings out for me. Community there, that's really big. So people, employment, Scottish, small businesses, yeah, okay. Feel free to keep adding to this as things come into your mind. Again, as I say, this will form part of our consultation response. It's what we feel as us in this room tonight. This is what we feel is important about local food. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but that doesn't mean that you can't stop adding to the word cloud. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so to lead us into the sort of the main part of this workshop, where we're going to be actually talking about some of the questions around local food, I'm going to pass over to Viv and Sophie from Dundee and Angus, just to tell us a little bit about why local food is important here and what some of the good things that are happening already. So just pass over to Viv first, I think.
Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you all for turning up this evening. I've had a quick peek at the participants list and I'm seeing lots of our very active food people from Dundee in the group. So I'm looking forward to lots of very engaged conversations later on. Now, I'm just going to say a few words. For those of you who don't know me, I've spent about 20 years being the food festival coordinator of the Dundee Flower and Food Festival. That's given me a great insight into food and food in the community and a lot of the organisations in the city. I work part-time at Abertay University, which many of you will know has got a food innovation unit and teaches food and consumer science. And this year, I've been helping start the process for Dundee to become a UK sustainable food place. So out of all these things, we've been doing a bit of research. I've been really lucky. I've been able to get some students to help with the research. So I just thought, here's some things around Dundee, things that are going on that might help set the scene, start you thinking about some of the things you might want to talk about in your discussion groups. You know, just set the scene. You know, Dundee, it's got a population of about 150,000 people. It's Scotland's 4th largest city. It's also Scotland's sunniest city. It also has one of the highest student population ratios in the UK. So you can realise that students play a big part in the food community that we've got. We also, you know, tourism and things plays a big role in what we do. We're 90 minutes from 90% of Scotland's population. So we can access a lot of food tourists as well. The city, we've got a vision to become a sustainable city. The council produced a Dundee Climate Action Plan in 2019, which talks about circular economy. We also have quite a specific food procurement set up in Dundee, where we jointly work with Tayside Contracts and Angus Council and Perth and Kinross Council. And Tayside Contracts provide school meals and community meals in Dundee. And I believe that Dundee Tayside Contracts is Tayside's largest catering organisation, serving over 4 million meals per year. So that's something quite specific to Dundee and Angus area. We've got a strong food and drink history. Everybody knows about, we've got a tradition of butchers and bakers. OVD rum was first blended and bottled in Dundee in 1838. We're also the home to CJ Lang, who serves over 300 spar shops throughout Scotland. Many of you know that we've got an increasing range of eating establishments in Dundee. And in terms of producers, we've got some food growing, we've got distillers and we've got brewers. But we're also at the heart of Tayside's bioregion, so we're absolutely surrounded by land that produces quality fruit, vegetables, game, beef, lamb. And we're also home to a lot of well-known food education and research establishments. We've got Abertay, we've got Dundee University, we've got Dundee and Angus College, we've got James Hutton Institute. So we've got a lot of food and science expertise in our area. And over the last 18 months, 2 years, we know that consumers have become more aware and more engaged with their local food and drink economy. The council, food is integrated into their city plan. They're committed to expanding community growing projects, building stronger and empowered communities, and supporting projects focusing on food poverty. Many of you know that they produced a local food growing strategy, and that is working with communities, local people and organisations to enable them to access grow your own opportunities. There's also plans to scale a growing hub up to 4 hectares, and the idea is that this hub, and I know some of you are in the room tonight, so let me get this right, it'll help to provide training and look at how local community growers can earn income for excess produce. We also have a very strong food insecurity network, and that's been very active over the last few months, and it brings together 27 local grassroots and small community-based projects from across the city, working alongside the council. They're based in the local communities, and they have helped a great deal over the last 18 months to 2 years. And I believe that they've over 3 million meals have been provided across Dundee as part of their ongoing efforts to support communities. You know, Dundee does have, it's estimated, I believe, that 5% of adults in Dundee experience food poverty, and Dundee has some of the most deprived areas in Scotland. So that's something I think we need to reflect on when we're looking at Dundee specifically. But also food waste is important. Dundee's got a segregated food waste system where they collect domestic and commercial waste, and it's used in anaerobic digestion to produce biogas for fuel and compost for local farmers. So there's a lot going on. I was very keen that we did this consultation jointly with Angus so that we could really look at the link between the city and its rural communities. And maybe we can discuss how, you know, we feed the city from our hinterland, how we can maybe strengthen the food chains at a sort of regional level, how we can improve access to education, training and skills. And many of you will know that the hospitality sector has been hit, our food and producer sector have been hit with staff shortages over the last 18 months. And this is something that we should be looking at, and maybe Dundee has got a role to play in helping with that. So over the next few couple of hours, I'm hoping that we're going to discuss farming practices, diets, food waste, how we can provide good food for everyone and good jobs for everybody involved in the food system. Maybe we look at how we can be more joined up, what the partnership approach could be, and how we value food and how we might think and behave differently in the future. And so that's kind of an urban perspective. And Sophie obviously is here from Angus, who can maybe talk about the rural perspective, but also the opportunities for working together. Sophie, are you okay to come into the room now?
Yeah, thank you very much, Vivian. That was really interesting to hear everything that's going on in Dundee, and it's great that we have that connection already and that we're already in touch and collaborating with other cities in the Tay Cities region. Hi everyone, my name is Sophie, and my role is Food and Drink Coordinator for Appetite for Angus, and we're one of the Scotland Food and Drink regional food groups. So we share all the good practice and sort of everything that's going on in terms of food and drink in Angus, regionally with all the other food and drink groups. We look after businesses, but also third sector, which is extremely important to us, to make sure that Angus is represented fairly, because I do believe that local food and drink obviously is so paramount. So in Angus, obviously, agriculture is really important. It makes up a lot of the food and drink market. We're renowned for our berries, our vegetables that are grown locally, etc. So food and drinks are really important. And sorry, I'm really nervous and just sort of like stepped into this. So what's going on in Angus? So we have developed a food growing strategy in partnership with the local council, also with the local community groups, so the growing and food projects, and that's being put into place. All the work that sort of like Appetite for Angus do, the community involved, as well as the local businesses, as well as the local councils and partners. We are part of the Tay Cities Food and Drink group, so that's been really important to us because we can connect with Dundee, Fife and Perth, and we can discuss really important topics such as local procurement. So we want to see all our regions in Tayside be healthy schools, not healthy schools, sorry, Food for Life accredited, and get that gap on the map filled so that we can get that certification. So we've had a lot of really positive conversations to hopefully make that happen, and those conversations will continue. We're delighted to have Kate, who is actually on this call, and she's representing Grow Angus, which is fantastic. And she's working with a lot of the local food and growing projects to connect them and to share all the fantastic work that's been done. I have experience of volunteering for Social Supermarket Angus, which were the first social supermarket based in Forfar. And their ethos is basically about combating food insecurity, but also food waste. So being a volunteer, I got to see like all aspects of how that is. I'm seeing Simon's comment about volunteering still work. Yeah, you're right. It was a great to experience that. Obviously, it's one thing representing sort of like food and drink in Angus, but another thing to actually see the front line and what's actually making an impact. So things like fairer access to food obviously come into play, access to healthy and nutritional oh god, I can't see, nutritionally balanced food, etc. Food miles, like Vivian was saying, the collaborative piece, so important to get local businesses and local food projects connecting and reducing those food miles. A lot of work being done in terms of sustainability in Angus as well. A lot of our businesses are starting to implement, sorry, I've just seen a comment. A lot of our businesses are starting to implement incentives for people to bring back bottles, things like that, to improve. And a lot of the food projects are measuring their waste, so they're being able to track that and show that they're making a positive impact. Let me see what else I can say. In Angus, we have over 16 growing projects, that food and growing projects, which we host a meeting with every 6 weeks, so they can come together, support each other, identify ways they can collaborate, etc. I've probably missed something out. Let me see. I think we'll leave it at that, if that's okay, because yeah, that's me. I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say, and I will hand back to Simon. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Thank you. Amazing. So much stuff happening across Dundee and Angus. Yeah, and could I say that, Sophie, well done, because you just got dropped in on this like literally 5 minutes ago, because Kirsty, who was going to be giving an overview of Angus, the long story, but all the tech went down, so we were like scrabbling around at the last point, and Sophie stepped up to the plate to do this. So well done on no notice whatsoever.
Thank you. Sorry, we're not very professional. I tried my best.
We're all professional, apart from me. So what we're going to do now, we're going to, this is you've had some background, so you've heard why we're here, what the consultation is doing. We've started thinking a little bit about what local food means to us and where we live, and we've heard from Viv and from Sophie about what's been happening around Angus and Dundee, and I'm sure that's only scratching the surface. So if you're involved in some projects here that haven't necessarily been talked about so far, that doesn't mean that they're not there. It's just we only have a finite amount of time. What we're going to do is move into a point where you are going to be able to talk about the things that are important to you. So like I said, the consultation itself is split into kind of 3 pillars. So I just say, if I share this here, ooh, there you go. So the 3 pillars of the food strategy consultation are connecting people with food, which is around making land available, growing your own, learning about food and improving access to food. There's connecting Scottish producers with buyers, so talk about short supply chains, encouraging retailers and consumers to buy local food, whatever local, however we define it. And then the third pillar is harnessing public sector procurement. So that's how do we use the public purse to actually do good stuff, and how do we keep that money within the local area? And people will be obviously aware of community wealth building, and there's a Community Wealth Building Act that's coming through in the next level of Parliament. So, and then we've got brackets vertical farming, because that was put in there as we discussed before. Now, the three questions we're going to talk about are a little bit honing in on the kind of key elements as we see them, and what they're the three key questions that we believe that policymakers themselves should be asking when they're putting together a local food strategy. So number one is, how can Scotland grow more of what it eats and eat more of what it grows? How can a local food plan improve the health and well-being of everyone in Scotland? And how can a local food plan make the maximum positive impact on the environment and biodiversity? So the way it's going to work is there are going to be 3 breakout rooms, but everybody's going to have a chance to answer each of the questions. So it's the way it's going to happen is, first of all, you're going to go into a room, and it's going to be randomly allocated. And you'll go in there with your facilitator and someone who'll be taking notes on a Jamboard. And imagine a Jamboard is effectively like a digital flip chart with post-it notes. So as you're developing your arguments and developing your thoughts, someone will be there in the background, putting them up on post-it notes and sticking them up on the screen. Okay. You'll be in the first room with the first question for 15 minutes. Okay. After 15 minutes, your facilitator and the person making notes will move. So you'll have someone else coming into your room, and they'll say, with a different question, and they'll say, oh great, so the first group said this. At that point, we'll be asking you to sort of add to the thought thinking that's already been done before. So if, for example, we need to grow more and eat more of what we have in Scotland, someone may have put at the top line, well, we need more farmers. So perhaps you'll be adding, well, how do we get more farmers? So it might be, well, we need more training for farmers. We need more support for entrant farmers. Okay, great. So you're building on these arguments and getting, more and more down into the nitty gritty of what is the key ask for Scottish Government. And then after 15 minutes, you move again. And so you'll be adding on to a question that has already had 2 groups working on it already. So do you see what I mean? So what we're doing is we're getting more and more granular and adding more things on. Now you may think in the second or the third time you move, you'll think, oh, actually, that's something missing. Do feel free to add on to it. You don't need to just get deeper and deeper into what's already there. But what we're going to be doing is just, as I say, just getting things a little bit, as clear as we can of what we're asking Scottish Government we need to do. Sounds very confusing, probably will be really confusing, but let's see. Okay, so we're going to go off into breakout rooms now. And just be aware there'll be a little bit of a time as people get changed over, and you'll get a note to say, how many long you've got left in that breakout room. We'll come back and then we'll move on to sort of the final bit of the workshop. So that's going to be 45 minutes. You're going to have 3 questions, and you're going to go to each question in turn. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hello, hi.
Everyone there.
Hi.
I think that's everyone here. Oh yeah, I can see you now, Jeremy. Hi. And I don't know if Brian's gonna put his video on or not. So our is everyone there? Oh yeah, hi Brian. So our question for our group is how can Scotland grow more of what it eats and eat more of what it grows? So I think we can get lots of answers for that one, because we have an abundance of produce that we grow locally and regionally. Does anyone want to kick us off with some thoughts?
I'd say the first thing to look at there is having local processing and packing facilities. It's on the scale of looking at it, it's not all about sticking it in local box schemes necessarily, although that has a part to play, but far too much of what we grow actually has to go out of the region and actually out of Scotland for washing, packing, grading, whichever, to then all come back again. And then if you look at, you know, let's say some of the smallholders and smaller end farms, you know, beef, lamb, pigs, those sorts of things, you know, there are tremendous, tremendous lack of local facilities as far as that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that, Jeremy. I know something that comes up often in conversation is, which is obviously meat related, is the abattoir situation, and the fact that it's like from a animal welfare point of view and the food miles point of view, etc. There's just not really much resource. So that would be one of the things, but I wasn't aware of the sort of like packaging and preparation side of things. Obviously you'll have great knowledge in that with your role, so that's well worth noting. So what about what needs to happen? So do you think there needs to be more training, more education? Does anyone have any thoughts?
So most people buy their food from supermarkets these days. Yep. And if we're wanting, then the supermarkets need to play a big role in procuring Scottish produce, but also making it affordable. I mean, I know some of the supermarkets, such as Lidl, pay better than the other ones, but I think if we want to produce more and we want to get people to eat more Scottish produced food, then the supermarkets need to play a big role in that, and it needs to be affordable if we want to get the majority of people to eat it that may not even be that aware or bothered. What their main the thing they're most bothered about is how much it costs and how much it's going to cost to feed their family. And I think that is going to be a big issue.
Yeah, I think you're right. What do people think about sort of businesses being able to, or even, well, maybe not community growers because of the amount that they can actually produce, but like sort of having the conversation with local supermarkets for that procurement process or that wholesale process? Like, how can we make that more accessible? Does anyone have any ideas on that?
In terms of
I mean,
people like Lidl and Aldi seem to be far ahead of a number of the other ones in terms of engagement with the Scottish producers.
Yeah.
And therefore, the first thing is to have the actual presence on the shelves. No, there are other ones that will seemingly.
The co-op's pretty good as well. The co-op's really good.
Oh yes, they are. Yeah. But it's about, first of all, getting the product on the shelves, but also working with supermarkets and wholesalers who actually see a value in the provenance. You know, rather than it just be a thing that will appeal to, you know, the higher end of wealth and demographics. It's got to be accessible to all, isn't it?
Yeah. I know one key issue in Angus is that a lot of our sort of like a lot of our producers are quite small scale, and having the sort of knowledge of how to get these routes to market and how to get in front of a buyer can be extremely difficult. So, I mean, obviously, Jeremy, I know you work on a lot larger scale, so that probably isn't something that comes across with you guys, but the businesses we support, that is very much having that knowledge transfer for them to be able to develop their business. We
do operate down to the whole, you know, the smallholder end as well, but okay. You know, so all these routes, you know, but if you're looking at mass market in terms of how can we eat more of what we grow, then you know, the question seems to be about mass almost, doesn't it? The mass market, but actually, you know, you'd still like to see. You know, let's say places like Inverarity Farm Shop that opened, you know, 18 months, 2 years ago. You know, I think that's developed into something that probably the owners themselves didn't envisage. But you know, that now means that the people there in an area that's poorly served by public transport, you know, can easily just, you know, walk along and access local produce in the way that Carmiley can as well. But actually, it's very patchy around Angus, and then also the city of Dundee, as to how well you can do that. So I mean, Dundee's got some, you know, brilliant example in Fraser's fruit and veg for bringing local produce to a local market there, but we just haven't got enough of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is about raising awareness in general that sort of like these places exist, and like you say, making them more accessible, whether it's in terms of transport or like, yeah, awareness that they exist. So,
but even if you look at somewhere like Forfar, you know, I think that is crying out for a decent greengrocers, because, you know, if you're in the town there, okay, you can walk up to Asda, but just so often it's you know, the delivery's not come in. There's okay, you know, you can get Angus broccoli and things like that in there, but it's very poorly stocked, very poorly presented. But we don't then have you know, a high street alternative for the fresh fruit, fruit and veg. And I know it's not purely on fresh. It's just a question about you know, eating more of what's produced in Scotland, isn't it?
yeah, I think that is one of the, from my point of view, like S-Mart, for example, so social supermarket, even though they're third sector, they do get a lot of donations. I know it's not business, but they get a lot of local farmers donating, like eggs, for example, potatoes, like large amounts. So it means that there is fairer access to food for everyone, at accessible pricing as well. So it's not that boutique sort of farm shop sort of experience, but you're still getting the, like I say, you're still being able to access it. Like, so the Kirsty who was going to be facilitating made some notes, so I'm very much winging it. So she put things like, so what needs to happen? Would it be things like access to land? Would it be training, grants, community growing, increased access to market?
I think you probably need, you know, if we're talking about eating more what we grow, we should ourselves be growing a bit more as well. So providing people with space, with training, with long-term funding for facilitators and development workers, not just a year's worth of funding for someone to do it. It's got to be ingrained in what the councils do, or what the NHS have, or whoever it is who's working within that. But they need long-term funding solutions for people to support people, to teach people how to grow their own. You talk about vertical farming, or, you know, I actually don't have a garden. I live in the middle of nowhere, but I don't actually physically have a garden, but I can grow potatoes in pots. What about, I'm surrounded by farms. So when the tatties get harvested, we go out with our bags and collect them. So there's lots of sort of, right from the bottom all the way up to the supermarkets, there's lots of things that can be done. I was had a conversation in Dundee. There's loads of fruit trees in people's gardens, and a lot of the fruit just goes to waste. You know, what about collective and cooperatives that go and collect all the fruits, and then there's logistics involved in you know, sort of distributing, but I suppose, you know, if we can grow more, we eat more. The farming's a big thing of it, but also we could grow our own. But people, I wouldn't know how to do. I'm not, you know, I'm not a great grower, so I would need support on how to do that. But
so for example, there, if there was within the local community a you know, a local community building, you know, there might be an apple press or something like that. You know, so currently those that are just rotting on the ground, you know, family can get involved. Right, let's go and gather these up, take them down the road, press them, and we can have our own apple juice. You know, it just, you know, it engages more people, doesn't it?
Yeah. I also think that in education, people have to be aware of what's seasonal and what's not seasonal. I don't think people realise about seasonality, and I think that's a lot to do. I'm guilty of it too, because I buy red peppers all the time. But I'm starting to. I have an allotment too, so I know about seasonality. But I think what you have to understand what's seasonal, and not to expect to buy asparagus all the way through the year when it's actually only produced in February. And getting people aware of and looking at labels when they pick things up in the supermarket about where they've come from, green beans from Kenya or raspberries from James Porter up the road from me, that sort of thing. And so I think people need to have this awareness of what our land can produce, and adapt their diets accordingly, to be honest.
Just as someone who's an outsider to this, I think what's also interesting, I've lived in Angus for 6 years, and we have in Montrose, we have a farmers market the first Saturday of every month, which is really busy. And it's all, you know, localist produce, Perthshire, Tayside, Angus, Aberdeenshire. That only happens once a month in Montrose, and it's really busy. Now, I've worked in different parts of Europe, and one place was in the south of the Czech Republic called Brno. They have a market every day, and it's fresh produce from the local area, and anybody who's working in the office, they would go there. That's how they would shop. They didn't go to the supermarket per se, they went there. And I think the big difference was, probably following on from what you're saying, Alison, they didn't have to, everything was seasonal because it was bought from there. But I don't think we promote enough in around, especially in Angus, that we've got this great produce, but we have a market once a month. I just don't think it's enough. And that would also form part of an education for people if they actually shop this way, rather than the consumerist way of a big supermarket where you can get anything you want at any given time.
And I think there's a disconnect where you're suggesting in Poland, was it? I think that people are more connected with the land than they are here. There's a big disconnect, I think, between our population and the land and the understanding, whereas in Poland I don't think that happens. And we have a lot of community growing plots obviously in Dundee, and we do get quite a lot of Polish people who are interested, who understand and know how to farm the land and produce crops and things. I think it's far higher proportion than it should be based on the Polish community that are here, and that's because they've got a big connection with the land.
Sorry to interrupt, just because we might get pulled out of this room. Can
I come in for a minute and say that what I think is really important is education, and education at school level, getting schools involved in community growing and gardening and teaching children from a very young age and families just how easy it is to grow your own seasonal fresh produce.
Some of the problems that we have are the lack of school kitchens now with the centralised cooking for Tayside contracts.
Yeah, and that's something that we are really working on. But there's so many conversations. I know you guys have, as the NFU, have had conversations. I know the Tay City's Feed and Drink industry group are constantly sort of trying to push that forward, trying to get away from the cook, not away from it, sorry, get around the cook freeze. We're going out in 10 seconds, so thank you very much everyone. That was really valuable conversation, and we'll catch you shortly.
Which seemed mad. So I don't know, we didn't go into it, but yes, it does seem very unjoined up, if that's a word.
Hello everyone.
Hello.
How's everyone doing?
Yes, good.
Fantastic. Have you been having some good conversation in your first breakout room?
Yes, just scratching the surface, I think.
I think as soon as the conversation gets going, everyone's so passionate. It is really valuable to hear what comes out. So for our group, the question is,
Sophie,
how
can I just, Sophie, sorry, can I just, we're sharing somebody else's screen still on our view.
Yeah, I've not been moved.
Oh.
That's what it is. So I'm going to stop share. So if you want to share yours, Sophie, and I'll leave this breakout room and go to the next one.
Okay, thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Bye.
I thought, what's going on there?
No, that's fine. I was like, I can't have messed up already. Okay, cool. So,
we're good to go.
Our question is, how can Scotland grow more of what it eats and eat more of what it grows? So how can we keep it local and enjoy delicious, nutritious food? I'll just quickly recap sort of what the last group said, and we can build on that if that's okay. So a lot of the discussion was around sort of how growers can interact with the supermarkets, because obviously at the moment the supermarkets are the largest market where people go to get local food. So if we can increase the amount of local growers being featured in the supermarkets, that would be beneficial. We also spoke about sort of like raising awareness of seasonality and sort of that disconnect between people not understanding like how much is grown locally, and sort of like raising awareness of on packets, you know, where things come from, etc., who the grower is, a lot about education basically, and in public procurement and things like that, the resources and the facilities being less, which means that sometimes the food isn't as local or isn't maybe as nutritional because of how it's prepared, etc. So does anyone want to kick us off with your thoughts about how Scotland can grow more of what it eats and eats more of what it grows?
I would say one of the key things is to get more small scale growers, like community growing, because I think they often deal with things in a very different way and are super local and have very high environmental standards. And I think there's huge barriers to that.
So how would you propose that was sold, or what would increase the opportunity of that being?
Well, an ask to government might be that bigger scale growers make a small percentage of land available to communities to grow.
I think actually that it needs to be more drastic than that. I think there needs to be some kind of legislation about arable land use close to major cities, and that there should be some kind of exclusion zone, like a 10-kilometre exclusion zone, within which you have to be growing a diversity of stuff that will then supply that city specifically. So there should be like a veg belt around each major city, and that diversification will help with climate shocks and storms and that kind of thing, and those issues that are going to start becoming worse and worse. Reduce all the supply chains, and people would know where to get this stuff.
Is there an example of that? Has anyone else done that yet? I know France are much better at these things than us. I don't know.
You were so much better, sorry.
France, yeah, they do a lot of this supporting of smaller scale stuff already.
They probably do it kind of naturally though, don't they? It just happens, and then they have their lovely little markets and people turn up on their bicycles with stuff to sell, and that's the kind of system that we need to.
And maybe more local cooperative, like, so the whole supply chain becomes much more localized.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the last group, someone was saying about how in different countries they have like a market every single day. So like we've got, you know, say Montrose 1 week, and then another week we've got Forfar, and then that's pretty much it. And then there might be some really, you know, high-end markets that are more lifestyle than actual food, not more than food accessibility. Sorry, go on.
I know some growers here find markets really wasteful.
Yeah,
they cut a load of stuff for market, and then if it doesn't sell, it often goes straight to waste. So some sort of better procurement system would be better, I think.
I think affordability as well. I don't know what you guys think, but like, for example, if you want to go to Angus Farmers Market, and I'm not bad mouthing them, I'm just saying it's £45. So I mean, if you're selling fruit and veg, that's quite a big margin before you've even started. Then you've got your time, obviously, the actual growing process. maybe there's something about like a community growing market, or you know, that connects the local growers, and also has that seasonality, and that educational aspect. You know, there could be mini workshops and seminars during the market. What does anyone think to sort of looking at that sort of angle?
Yeah, definitely. I think the markets themselves need to be like super mega local as well, in each little area, rather than it being in the city centre on the, what is it, the third Saturday of the month or something. If it was, you know, you have one in Charleston and you have one in Lockheed, a shop front where people could take stuff to sell, and then it all just gets into the mix. I mean, so long as it's vegetables, the regulations to me are a bit over the top.
Yeah, well, we have registered the school as a local supplier now because we've grown stuff. Now, it would be good if local producers could had some simple way of selling their excess. Then there's a bit of an incentive for them. Yeah, don't know.
And I know a lot of, well, not a lot, but like there's a few really good case studies in Angus of one third sector project and a business that have started using the Too Good To Go app, which has gone really well. And I love that it's for third sector as well, because obviously it prevents waste, it saves people money, you're getting access to nutritious food, and it is local, and it can be hyper local because obviously you're searching where you live. So I think there is room for, even though they're quite commercial apps, I think we can still use that on a local level to prevent food waste and lower food miles, and get access to nutritious food. So that maybe that's something to raise awareness of, like of the food waste sort of strategies that are already in place rather than creating our own. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I suppose there's the funny thing with the food waste is that certain times you'll get a huge amount of one thing. And yeah, because all of these are generally small scale, local, volunteer run, sometimes dealing with 300 loaves of bread one day and then half a ton of carrots is, yeah, I don't know how you smooth that out.
What about connecting education with what about creating like a program of events for like school, for example, that demonstrate how to grow and things like that? I can't really think, sorry, my head's full now.
Well, I also wonder if there's, we done a focus group a few months ago around cooking, and one of the things that cropped up was people not knowing how to use a freezer. And I wonder if there's something there around the education of food storage. I mean, you talked about bread there, you can quite easily freeze bread and it would be less likely, you know, you could buy more of it and freeze it.
And preservation.
Yeah, there's something there. And I wonder if there's something about if someone's cooking a meal, to cook a wee bit extra and then connecting them with someone that can't cook. I'm thinking of maybe people at risk of undernutrition, or, you know, your elderly people. Is there some way that we can use that? Well, I mean, they're making that meal anyway. Can we make that connection?
There's a lovely system with bike riding, and we're looking at it for social prescribing. A buddy system of novice bike riders and more experienced bike riders. Now, maybe you could do that with people with cooking skills. So people who are learning about food and cooking, and people who have those skills already.
Yeah, great.
I think a lot of the food projects as well are looking at sort of having a space to do food education work. But again, it comes back to the funding, and a lot of funding is so short term, and that's what we were discussing in our previous breakout session, that really funding to make a positive impact and to give communities that resilience and that support, it needs to be, you know, a 3-year or a 5-year, not like a 1 or 1.5. It's so hard to have that longevity and legacy.
Yeah, we've just tried, so we've got 10 people through the community food preparing so that we could have community meals. So we paid for the training, and then hopefully they will come back and share meals together. So it is like building up the resource as well in the community to do things.
Yeah, I think so too. And Jackie's just saying about a buddying system for growing as well. Again, it is just that shared knowledge, but also I think it hits so many other outcomes in the community. So, you know, it prevents the isolation. Obviously, you get the sense of pride of learning something new and growing. It connects the community, and then obviously it means that everyone can enjoy more nutritious food that's seasonal, etc. Because it will just naturally be seasonal. Liz, what are your thoughts?
I feel a little bit out of my depth. I'm a student. I'm just kind of starting to learn about all of this. So I'm not sure at the moment, but
that's fine.
I'll let you know.
Cool. I just didn't want you to like not have a say, that's all.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm just a little bit out of my depth, but
that's okay. Me too.
Sophie, just to add, just from another side, just Viv had mentioned about students, and Liz is a student.
Yeah.
You know that Dundee has one of the highest populations of students in the per population. So for every 5 people in Dundee, there's a student. You know, how is education within the colleges and this academia encouraging you know, the students to cook better or to use local produce, or can they do community gardens, you know, on campus and things as well? I do think there's something around students in general within the city, certainly perspective, but I don't know other people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, we've done in Kerry, now it's not in the city, but I'm assuming you could do exactly the same thing, is cooking packs. So it was seasonal, whatever this garden was producing, we made up like 40 soup kits, basically. We did it every week over about 20 weeks over the summer, so people could learn to cook, and it was directed at young people who were just leaving home, and young carers who were living at home looking after parents and things. But yeah, presumably something like that, maybe with the Angus College, Dundee and Angus College, or, you know, but I think there's great opportunities, but when organisations work together.
There's also something there about just recognising the resources they have and the time they have as well. So we had produced a microwave resource, and initially that started at looking at weaning food, actually. So introducing solids, because, well, for a variety of different reasons. So it showed people how to use fresh produce in the microwave quickly to make weaning food. And then from that, we moved on to recognising that there was a lot of people that couldn't afford to buy a pack of carrots. So if they went in and bought a single carrot, how could they quickly cook that carrot in the microwave, steaming it? And I'm just wondering, I mean, that particular resource was around elderly people, but I'm wondering if there's something there for students as well, you know, that maybe don't have the time or the facilities to cook. You know, we could look at different ideas around microwave and helping them look at different ways of cooking.
I think that'd be great. And I think, again, like the preservation thing, you know, but going back in the day, that's why, you know, people had to learn alternative ways to preserve their food. And I think like there's a lot to be learned from sort of like going back and learning those methods, and the whole raising awareness around expiry dates and things like that can also help in terms of food access, etc. So we've got 1 minute to go, so it's going to count down. Any final thoughts? Any thoughts on seasonality?
Or particular ask to government as well, because we need to address some of that.
There's always contaminated land issues that come up for me as soon as we decide to try and put up a new community garden. And I think that is a big barrier. The legislation in general is a big barrier in all kinds of different ways, like having to do the cooking training when these things are cultural, traditional, whatever. I don't know, legislation can get in the way. Yeah. Lots of it's there for a reason, but sometimes it can get in the way.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's why this strategy has to represent everyone, and it has to be fair, and that, you know, why we're having these conversations. But you're totally right. That's us moving now. Thank you guys. I hope you found that helpful, and
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great. I think everyone is here. So hi everyone. Our question is, where have we gone? How can Scotland grow more of what it eats and eat more of what it grows? To give you a little summary of what we've been discussing so far is, well, there's loads. But basically, it'd be great to increase the amount of local markets so that local growers, whether they're community or commercial, can have the opportunity to showcase their produce. Education, there needs to be more commitment to education. So obviously, what we learn as a child, we take that through our life, and if we can have positive learning experiences around food and accessing food from a young age, then we'll take that forward. So it'd be great to have some investment in food education, things like raising awareness of seasonality, and which will also reduce food miles, supporting small scale growers, let me see what else. Basically working together to sort of raise awareness of local food and what opportunities there are to access it locally, and just sharing skills. And that's probably enough to get us going. Does anyone have any thoughts on how we can move forward?
I've been thinking a bit about agriculture recently, and just the role of farmers in this, and local farmers. Yeah, we've got the soft fruit growing areas, we've got potatoes, we've got broccoli, we've got carrots, we've got barley until it's coming out of our ears, we've got wheat, but you don't actually see anything much in the way of legumes being produced locally and sold locally at all. And that would be sort of pulses and legumes, so things like peas, beans, which can quite easily be grown. But obviously, I think farmers to a certain extent have to be incentivized to actually grow things like that, as opposed to, and perhaps give up some of the land that they use for barley, which then goes to malting and the whiskey industry. It's all tied into the system. But I mean, I know that if we could decrease some of the land that was used for barley and have it grow more in terms of food for humans, that would be one of my ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Liz.
I think one of my ideas would be around allotments. If you're in Dundee or you're in Perth, there's plenty of them. When you live out in a rural, like I'm in the Carsagowrie, and I don't know of anywhere that, you know, I could go and grow vegetables or whatever. And there's lots of agricultural land about. So why can't those farmers sell it to the, you know, the locals, so that we can then grow our own food? And I don't know if anyone saw just last week, but, you know, Mary Berry was off meeting some people, I think in Wales, who had an allotment. And it was just amazing, you know, that this man was self-sufficient for the whole of the year, pretty much. And you just think, why can't we do that, you know, in our own areas?
There are places in the world that've got community growing, and there's somewhere in New Orleans that I read recently, and this guy goes and plants stuff in spare land, you know, land just where he's wandering about, and he puts carrots and stuff in, and people can pick them, they're just there. But he's retired, and I don't know, he obviously feels he's doing good, but it's actually really well used, and there's lots of instances like that. So, and I'm not saying everybody needs to go Dundee and start planting carrots and things, but I do think the government, that as an ask to government around allotments and things like that, you know, to free up land, to maybe support allotments being given to local people, so long as they're being used properly, then I think there is something in that. So definitely, yeah, it's good idea.
I agree. I think there's a lot of waiting lists. I know there's a lot of projects as well that are working on identifying pieces of land, and the councils are working really hard to do that. But I think there's always sort of room for either, like you say, the farmers to come forward and pledge a certain amount of land, or additional land to be identified as you sort of notice it, just to make it as inclusive as possible for people to grow.
It would be good to understand what the carbon benefits are of growing our local crops, as opposed to just planting trees that grow away in the hillside but get vast amounts of money invested in them. So would it not be better for us to grow lots of crops? I don't know.
Yes,
just a question.
I think one of the things is actually to encourage farmers more in terms of crop rotation, of which livestock actually form part of that. So it's when you talk about sustainable diets, it's not actually vegan or meat eating. It's actually trying to decrease slightly the amounts of meat, particularly processed meats that people have, but actually livestock play a part in the biodiversity of farms and things. So it's educating people about that as well. The other thing I'd sort of thought about was actually internships and volunteering for pupils during holidays on farms to try and encourage people or develop people's interest in agriculture and horticulture.
Yeah, I think that'd be really good to raise awareness, because we were speaking in one of the other groups about that disconnect between what's grown locally, especially for those that don't live in a rural area. They might not realise that sort of like blueberries are grown 10 miles down the road. And I know the work we're doing in Angus, like Angus growers, they're a collaborative of growers. They're like really keen on raising awareness of what is grown locally and getting that word out and that education piece. But I think the awareness needs to be more, and I think the companies that have got the facilities should be taking ownership and sort of telling their story and saying, we do rotate our crops, or we do sell peas, for example, like Liz was saying, and we do stock them locally in X, Y, and Z.
There's a big piece here about supply chain as well, because if I've done quite a lot of projects on food and drink, and one of the things that we did used to do was lots of learning journeys. So we would take chefs to see sheep farmers, and just go and see what's actually happening, and then to the berry farms and see, you can pick your own, but do they realize what's on the doorstep and how they can bring that into their establishments? So you've got B&Bs, you've got lots of restaurants, you've got guest houses. There's lots of stuff on our doorstep that we could bring into the establishments we've got, but a lot of people don't know how to access it. They don't know how to talk to whoever it is to get that, other than going to the end of the road and buying it, and that doesn't work on a supply chain sort of focus. So I think there's a lot more work connecting people up could be done across Tayside.
Yeah, and I think that should be part of the strategy, though, to connect sort of not only to connect the farmers to everything, so connecting to education, to connecting to consumer, and getting that word out. I know something that we're trying to do with Appetite for Angus is like celebrate community posts. So we're trying to keep it really positive and sharing really good news stories. Like, for example, Foodies Free in Carnoustie have just successfully grown watermelons in Carnoustie and peanuts in Carnoustie. And they're just the most inspiring group of people and part of the global Foodies Free movement. And it's like stuff like that is what gets people inspired, and that's where the innovation comes from. Inspiring people inspire people. So I think there needs to be definitely some joined up work going on to get more local produce enjoyed by everyone.
Yeah, totally agree.
One of the things that I really enjoyed actually during the lockdown, the first lockdown, was the Facebook videos that Go Rural Scotland did.
Yeah, they were awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was a brilliant way of connecting people and inspiring people and showing people just what life on farms and growing things and raising livestock and then producing stuff and selling it can be like.
I think
we have a lot of, oh, sorry.
No.
I was just going to say, Dundee, other cities have got lots of industrial buildings that are empty. They're waiting for big tenants to come in. So why are we not putting vertical farms in there that don't touch the fabric of the building, but just live in there for a little while? That might be useful.
I think that'd be great, but I don't know about you guys. I work in food and drink, but that is still really, really new to me, sort of the concept of vertical farming. And when I was filling out the consultation, I was like, right, okay, I know there's the James Hutton Institute, etc., and I know there's a lot of innovation, and we've got links with SAC Consulting, and they're doing loads of innovation. But I think, like, for me, I need more education on that. I don't know about anyone else.
Yeah.
So maybe
I think, sorry, me butting in again, but it was just thinking about vacant buildings and thinking of Dundee city centre and shops and things sitting vacant, and is there any way that things like that could be used as not just selling produce, but also as cookery schools for people to drop into and yeah.
I think in terms of strengthening the economy as well, that would be amazing, Liz, because it's giving people an experience, but it's also educational, and it's also showcasing local, whether it's local businesses that could come in, whether it's local farmers that could come in and do a quick seminar about local grown carrots or seasonality, or it could be a real innovation hub in terms of food and local food. So I think that would be really, really good to, yeah. I think we're going to get scooped out of here in a second, just to let you know. One of the things, I don't know if I'm talking too much, but a long time ago when I was at uni, I volunteered for Jamie Oliver Ministry of Food, which was in Leeds City Market. So what you did was you went and got all your produce in the market and took it back to the community kitchen, and we learned to cook. Well, I didn't learn to cook because I was volunteering, but we taught local people how to cook, and it was also a health club, and that was bang in the city centre, and I just found that so inspiring. And I think things like that, there's so many positive outcomes, and we're speaking about like students, for example, in Dundee, that would be amazing for them to learn their essential skills for life.
Yeah. Almost sort of you feel like well, skills for life, menu planning, shopping, cooking should all be part of the school curriculum. Freshers week at unis and colleges and whatnot too. Yeah.
But I think through that experiential learning journey, and it's also sociable, food connects people. We all need it to survive. So there's a lot of really positive outcomes that can come around food and drink. So I'm not sure where we're not getting scooped out, but go on.
Government should charge people more to bring unhealthy food into the country. So we should just tax it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. They were trying to, weren't they? But I don't think they've really. Yeah.
And also put up the business rates for those retail outlets that are basically promoting unhealthy diets to people.
I think it'd be great to see longer term funding. I think that's come out of a lot of the conversations that we've had. Instead of a 1 year or 2 year development worker or long term, I think it needs to be especially in these crappy times, we're not even out of a pandemic yet, so it needs to be long term with defined goals. Oh, we've got 1 minute, guys.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
There's a lot to do.
I think the conversations have been really inspiring, and I think the people that are here are really genuinely wanting to make positive change, and if everyone's feeding into the consultation, then surely that can only be a good thing.
I don't think consumers understand how much the impact food waste has. You know, I think it's quite easy just to throw your food out, isn't it? You just don't get how difficult the problem is. Yeah, I mean, because Zero Waste Scotland do say that it's worse than plastic waste, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Olio on their sort of app site say if food were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases after China and the USA. So yeah, people don't realise that, as you say.
But again, it's about telling that story and raising that awareness, because I think sometimes people think, oh, well, I can't make a change. And it's like, well, actually you can, because you can educate yourself and you can take tiny steps. And if everyone takes tiny steps, then, you know, and if you learn something along the way, even better, you get a boost, you get that sense of pride. And yeah, I think there's a lot of, it's promoting the positive outcomes that can come from all this change.
I mean, I don't know how
I think, have we got everyone in that's supposed to be in here, I hope? Welcome, I'm Norma. I'm a development worker with Angus Tourism Cooperative. I have a strong background in rural tourism and local food and drink. I was a founder, member of the Appetite for Angus Food and Drink Network. Food and drink's at the heart of everything that goes on in my life. And especially in tourism, every tourist and visitor that comes wants to eat. But I have a strong interest as well in food insecurity. So yes, welcome. So our question should be up on the board. Thank you, Suzanne. And I should have welcomed, of course, the most important person in the room for me at the moment is Suzanne, who is in charge of the techie part, because my technical skills are not great. So I'm happy to be doing the chatting part. But the chatting, of course, is down to you. The success of this will be down to you guys. So our question is, how can a local food plan improve the health and well-being of everyone in Scotland? So we're looking for you just to jump in with ideas, and they'll start popping up here like little post-it notes, and it'll, first of all, it'll be the little yellow post-it notes, which will be your ideas. So now please don't be shy, because then I'll pick on someone.
Well, access to good food is central to health. So if you're improving access to good local food, then ergo you get better health.
Okay.
With it.
Access to the food. Thank you, Kate.
Yes.
And I also wonder if there's something there about showing people what to do with the food as well. So we know that cooking skills can be an issue when it comes to fresh produce.
So would we put that under education? Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
That? Or,
yeah.
Okay, so we've got access, and we've also got education.
And I guess another part of that is if people are involved with the actual growing, then yeah, they're learning what good food is, what it looks like.
Yeah, so it's the practical, hands-on part.
Is somebody else scribing here?
I think perhaps Simon is scribing.
Yeah, I was doing it. It seemed like it was sticking. It wasn't.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just see if you can work at your end. I'll just keep scribing until you get your end. Okay.
Perfect. So we've got the actual hands-on growing of the food, and we've got education and access to that food. Anyone else got any thoughts about ideas before we start going a bit deeper into those ideas?
I'm assuming if it's local food, then it might be cheaper as well if you're producing food that can be grown locally.
So the cost,
yeah.
So affordable. You want?
Yeah.
I wonder if there's also something about culture change there. So by exposing people to more nutritious food, we're more likely to change the cultural habit that we have in Tayside, you know, high consumption of fatty and sugary foods, and moving away from that and steering towards fruit and veg. Apologies if I'm jumping around a little.
So that's habit change of habits.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the food culture, isn't it? Yeah.
I think it's important to realise that it's a holistic thing as well, that if you are getting local food growing in such a way that you've got people being able to access it directly, then you're looking at improving mental health and people getting outdoors and people experiencing nature and all that kind of thing. It's you know, it can grow arms and legs and become a really holistic way to improve everybody's lives. It's not just about the eating of nutritious food. It includes everything, doesn't it?
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. And I guess that then takes you to land use and how you're impacting on land use and biodiversity and all that stuff.
Yeah. So bringing in agroecology.
Very, very big.
It's everything.
If I'm not representing what you say, if I'm just sort of, it doesn't catch on, just do let me know and I'll change it. Okay.
Thanks, Simon. Any other ideas or things that you think are missing from those ideas?
I think I put the word pesticides in the word cloud, not because I want to be eating pesticides, but because I would hope that if we have a local food plan, then we can start to impact on the use of pesticides locally, so you can have more confidence that what you're eating is actually pesticide free.
Okay.
Yeah, I put the word accountability in the word cloud, and that for me was very similar, is that you know who's grown it, how it's been grown, and they're in your community. There's a real important thing about connecting all of that together.
Yeah, and you trust them to do it.
Yeah, okay, so that's accountability there as well. Okay. All right.
I'm assuming it will help the economy as well. If they're growing, everything's growing local, and we'll all buy in local, that actually it will be supporting each other as a.
Yeah. Okay, so there's the financial, positive financial side. Sorry, Kate, I was talking over the top.
No, it's just that donut economics thing of keeping the money and everything more local.
So the circular economy would be in there as well. Thank you, Simon. Okay, so I think that's pretty good spread of ideas, and are they all in there now? I was writing at the same time, but if anybody thinks that there's something that they popped in there that we haven't got, yeah, Simon's typing away quickly there. Food that nourishes those that grow, produce, cook, and grow as well as those that eat it. Education, access, food. So, well, let's start having a look then at education. So, with regard to food education, I'm trying to remember who it was that I've not got you all on screen here, and names of the best 40. Was it Sarah? I think was talking about education.
Yes, it was. I guess.
What do you think that needs to happen for that education part to?
I think we need consistency with our key health messages. I think often nutrition messages can get a bit mixed with the media and what's going on, like carbohydrates are bad for us, for example. So I think there just needs to be consistency in terms of evidence-based nutrition messages and what's good for people's health.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else think there's anything that education should encompass?
Well, in the work that Sustainable Kerry has done in schools in Kerry, a key part of it is kids are not used to dealing with raw food. It's maybe not the culture at home. So we've done a lot of work on tasting and trying things out in school and not sending food home because it tends to just get dumped. So yeah, there's a whole load of just simple learning about food.
How easy has it been to get into schools to do that? I wonder if there's something around making it more accessible for third sector services to you know, engage with schools and start that sort of work. I know that some people have had difficulty with that.
Yeah, well, we've been very lucky in that every kid at Northmuir, every class spends 2 hours a week in the garden growing stuff. And that has made a phenomenal difference, and they love eating stuff straight off the plant. But I know that Southmuir didn't feel comfortable with that, so they haven't done that. So it is, I don't know how to make it easier. We try and do the same thing in every school. Yeah.
If there's anyone else here involved in that education side, is it down to the individual head teachers, or is there a, you know, is there a school thing? Does that happen?
Is that very much down to the head teachers? Yeah. But in my experience with schools, they're desperate for anything. Anybody who will turn up and actually take a lesson and tick some of their boxes, they're usually really happy for people to come in and do things like that.
Okay, we seem to not have our Jamboard up there temporarily, but I'm sure it will probably come back again.
That's my fault.
No, that's all right. It's fine. Here it is. It's the nice green colours are popping in there. Yeah, so it's interesting. You know, where you're talking about the children being outside and so on, and having access to that too. So, you know, the holistic approach that we were talking about earlier is obviously comes under the education side too, and it's like a lot of other things, I guess, that are cross-pollinating. Pardon the pun. Okay,
can I come in? Sorry, can I come in? I'm Dundee and Angus College, and I'm nice to see some people I already know. Hi, Sarah and Kate. I think we're trying to work at that from the kind of the young people's angle, because we do have a similar problem with, as Sarah says, that actually young people don't actually, you know, so not the really young people, but the young adults don't actually really understand where food comes from or whatever. So obviously what we're trying to do is link the food growing work that we do in the college with the cooking, the hospitality kitchens in the college, so that actually they grow them and then they go into the kitchen and cook them. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping that within the group that we're in, that we'll start growing that more. But I think there is a big education piece. And one of the examples that I got given by one of the horticultural lecturers was that I think we were giving away free produce or something that we'd grown in the allotment, and a young mother came up and she didn't actually know that it was safe enough to touch a dirty potato, because you only see clean potatoes in the supermarket. So she thought there was maybe something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm. And we've had that, taking food into schools from local producers and using it. Yes, so you run into the same sort of legislation that says if we're not a listed supplier, we cannot take that food to school. So there's all kind of weird stuff that goes on. Yeah.
We have had difficulty in the past taking, like if we do cooking groups in schools, we've not been able to use chicken, for example, for safety side of things. But then at what point can you start to teach people how to safely cook chicken? So yeah, I just wonder if there's something there as well.
Okay.
And one thing that we haven't really gone on to there is waste. Of food waste. Yeah, because I know that our schools have also just started, well, they went down to the food hub and selected a load of coming up to its date food, and then took it back to school and cooked it and then served it up in school. And so there's all kinds of learning that can happen. But yes, it depends very much on the culture in school, I think, whether it does happen. Okay.
I think we'll try and move on to another one, so that you've got the opportunity within this time that we've got here to look at some of the other ideas that you've come up with. So I guess, as we said earlier, some of them they all cross over. You know, the culture change, that's, you know, that would be your education too, and that's why Suzanne's kindly grouping all that together. How about the access to food and affordability? Kate, I'm not sure if that was one that you. Or sorry,
yeah,
I've got two Kates. It was the other Kate actually.
Oh, sorry, other Kate.
I think there's exceptionally poor access to local food, certainly in Dundee. I don't think you can get local food at all unless, I mean, even when during the pandemic I got a veg box from Turriffs expecting it to be all locally produced stuff, and it wasn't. It was all bought in and beans from Kenya and stuff like that. So I think that's, in Dundee at least, exceptionally poor.
But and to go back to what they were saying about local, I think for the purposes of the consultation, I think they're talking about local as being a Scottish food. So you know, if you're in the city and the local, would local food be that food from Angus that is, you know, all the, you know, you've got the fish, the beef, the arable, the fruit and vegetables. So is it that you know, local needs a bigger?
It should be, but I think even looking at Scottish produce, you wouldn't actually know, because the enormous majority is just bought from the big supermarkets. And even if it's Scottish produce, has it actually been shipped to England, put in a plastic bag and then brought back again? Who knows?
Well, yeah, and speaking to a local fruit producer here, he said he couldn't even sell stuff in Dundee for various reasons, which seemed mad. So I don't know, we didn't go into it, but yes, it does seem very...
Oh, we've moved without, I must have missed my warning of you are now moving somewhere else.
Norma, I don't think we should be in the same room.
No.
No, it's fine, because what will happen is Viv and I will get moved out tonight.
Ah, oh, we've been moved.
Just like that.
I'm going to sit here and say, wonder what happens next.
Oh, well.
It's all gone very quiet.
I know.
Yes, so I hope I haven't lost the rest of my... Oh no, Suzanne's still there, that's good, because she was doing all the scribing. And we had been working on our Jamboard with our question, and I'll just give them a minute to hopefully get that back up again. Because we've got, well, welcome everybody to the next room. I feel it's the bizarre experience to be in another room, even though I've not left my seat. So that's a new one for me. I'm Norma. I'm your facilitator for this wee session here, and we've got Suzanne who is helping with the Jamboard. We are facing a few wee technical challenges, but we're getting there. There's good discussion going on, which is good. So we've started working on the question of how can a local food plan improve the health and well-being of everyone in Scotland. And a lot of the chat so far has been around that education piece and the holistic approach to how we make sure that, you know, local food and local, whatever that may mean to you, is available and affordable, and as people have access to that. So the key things to start with, the ideas that came out were that education and growing, the culture change towards healthy food, linking people to food, access to food and affordability. And there was a few other ones coming in as well, about pesticides and so on, and you know, accountability. So as we delved a little bit deeper in there, you'll see that with regard to education, we've got, you know, where are the opportunities for actually trying local and Scottish food? You know, what roles do schools play? How consistent are the messages out there? And how do we get that link going on? So you can see that we've worked on that education and growing one a bit. So maybe it would be that you can maybe have a think about, you know, what are your thoughts on access to local food and the affordability of that local food? Anybody feel free to jump in on that one. We'll have a wee look at that one first. And this is round about how this local food plan can improve the health and well-being of everyone in Scotland. You know, what is it about that access to local food and well, not just the affordability. That was kind of two ideas that have been merged in together there. But you know, what does that mean?
It means that everyone will get the same shot.
no matter where you're from.
Norma, what's going through my head is, you know, we know in Scotland that we've got an issue with obesity and diabetes and, you know, cancer. So for me, there's a big thing in here about, you know, local foods, good quality, freshness, etc., that would hopefully allow people to make really good food choices that might help reduce, you know, some of those, you know, sort of long-term conditions.
Do you feel that that comes under the access to the food or the education side? Or
I think it comes under both, because you need to be able to educate people to understand the effect that food can have on your health and well-being. You know, when I first read that question, you know, the first thing that sprung to my mind was, you know, the health of the Scottish population. And you know, the Scottish Government is nothing but versed in that, and obesity strategies. There's an obesity strategy for Tayside as well. You know, how can we link in with all of that work? How does this work link in with that work?
Okay, and you know, then there is absolutely the opportunity when you come into a room where there's already been a discussion to add something that you feel is important and to add into the feedback on this. So that's just what's been put right in the middle there. So thanks.
I think just to add to what Caroline was saying, and just some of the discussions we had in the previous room about education and access. I've worked for many years as a dietitian, Caroline likewise, and is still in the health service, and access to food is one of the main barriers. But as Caroline also said, it's knowing what to do with the food, and it's knowing, even back to basics, how to budget and where food actually can fit into the available money that people have for their daily expenditure. And often, it's food is the first thing that people will cut back on when they're short of money, rather than actually several other things. So yeah, I'm waffling a bit here, but it's being able to actually being able to know how to menu plan, how to budget, where to go for local food. So there needs to be promotions for local food. And as I said, actually in the previous session as well, is we need to have local food accessible for people in their environments. And if they can have bought into it, then they'll hopefully be able to use it more.
So what do you think, sorry. So what do you think needs to happen to make that happen? Anybody? I'm throwing that question out there to anyone. You know, what needs to happen?
People need time, and lots of people don't have it.
Yeah. What, sorry?
To do all of these things. Time. So being busy at work and coming back late, there's no time to actually prepare foods. And if you're a mum with 3 children, you don't have the time to do it. And it's having local, accessible, affordable food that a mum with children can go home and prepare. Rather than being something that we just get from Europe that you put in an oven.
I think that, again, it's back to an education piece on this. I mean, if you look, and I'm going to use Jamie Oliver, he did that for the book 15 minutes, and you get books for like 5 ingredients and cook your supper, and it's actually cheaper than a takeaway. And I know that McDonald's do 99p burgers and stuff, and there's a lot of people who go that way, but I think it's knowing how to cook it. And I think people are frightened of cooking. There's a lot of youngsters with children, they won't cook, and again, they do say it's back to time, but sometimes you've got to wait 20 minutes, 45 minutes for a takeaway. By that time you could have cooked a really good meal for probably a quarter of the price. So it definitely is, how do you get that message out to the people that need to hear it, and how do you help them do that and access the food to do that as well?
Yeah. What was going through my head was, as Liz was speaking, was just about affordability for people. I'm very aware of a situation at the moment where a person normally who works full-time and earns about £500 a week is currently off sick and is now on sickness benefit of £90 a week. And how do they then pay their bills and put nutritious food on the table? And the only reason that that person is managing to survive is because their partner is in full-time work. So there's something in here, and I know there's a question about, you know, ask of the government. There has to be something around, you know, particularly people who are, you know, experiencing ill health through no fault of their own, who are faced in a benefit situation, who then can't afford. So there's something about the minimum wage and benefits being able to help people to plan and eat well, and that will help maintain their health and well-being, and actually might help them, you know, aid their recovery during that time of illness.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, a lot of it is as well as cooking on the cooker. So like the electricity and things that you would use to heat up a pan of water, whereas you know, sticking something for 3 minutes in the microwave is actually cheaper for your electricity bill. So it's things like that as well.
Anybody else?
I think when people make bad choices, they're either not interested in why it's bad for them, or they're just not sure it's really bad. And I think, you know, I think if we were able to make more of that, then people would make better choices. But that's, you know, that can be quite a scary thing, can't it?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's an interesting one, Sarah. You know, and it is that ask, what is it that needs to happen to make sure that that isn't, you know, it's that those barriers are not there, or not as many of them. You know, what is it that we need to do? What is the ask?
I think there's a thing about food waste as well. I mean, I remember my granny, she made like half a dozen meals out of a chicken. I mean, we had soup, we had bits left of this, and this went into that, and there was chicken pie, and there was vegetables in it, and there was meat potato pies, and it was, everything was used and made into, I mean, because we were quite a big family, and my grandma had other grandchildren as well, and there was always something there, but she had very little money. And I think we've lost that ability to be able to do that, and we throw such a lot away, you know. And how do we educate people to use what they've got in the fridge before it actually ends up in the bin? That you could actually make soup with it, or you could actually get something, freeze it. You know, I think there's a lot of stuff just gets bought and binned, and there's a big thing in there for me, I think.
So there's a lot of work by Zero Waste Scotland at the moment, particularly within NHS environments, about reducing food waste over the next few years. So what can Zero Waste Scotland do to help the household? I haven't checked that out. Maybe they already provide information, but you know, how can we just tie up and work with them a bit more closer on, you know, helping?
I think it needs to be front and centre, because a lot of this stuff you can access, you can find it out. You know, if you've got the will, you can go and, you know, Google all sorts of different things, or go to Zero Waste. But if it's not there, you're not, you know, it's got to be on the radar. It's got to, you know, it's got to be really front and centre for people to actually take that on board. And I think if you can treat it that you can actually save money doing this, I think that's a trigger as well.
One of the other things, I mean, I've been out of the health service for over a year now, so I've maybe not been aware of what's been going on sort of locally, but food sharing and food sharing apps are one of the ways. I live in outside Dundee, but one of the things that is happening locally is more people using something called Olio, which is a food sharing app. So you can see people put up what they have that is perhaps heading towards its best before date, and they're not going to use it. So that can then be accessed by anybody and picked up and used. So that can save money and also save the food waste as well.
I've not heard about that, Liz. That's quite a good idea.
Yeah.
So just jumping on the just jump on the Olio thing. I know the team that do Olio, and it's really great in urban environments, but it doesn't work very well in rural environments, because if you've got a bottle of milk that you're not going to use because you're going on holiday, you're not going to travel across the Highland to pick it up. You know, so it's appropriate. It works very well with students. So, and obviously Dundee, as we heard before, got a student population. Sorry, bye bye.
No, thanks, Simon. Yeah. Thank you. I know we've only got a couple of minutes to go. I think I did notice the messages this time. I didn't notice them in the last stream about how many minutes we had left. So that's really bored down a bit into that access to food and the barriers that are in place. And I guess the next group that come in, we could have a look at that and see, you know, what is that ask to government? What is that we can, you know, say, like, what is the you know, you're talking about simple things like, well, it's not simple, but I mean, it's someone losing their job because they're off sick. And you know, if you don't happen to be working for someone where you've got lots of sick pay, it's really, really hard. And it's that big change in circumstances that can just be one, you know, you're just one step away from that. And what are the support mechanisms that can be in place for that? Okay. So we're going to move around. It's amazing seeing all this hopping all over the place magically. Right. Oh yeah, social prescribing of food. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
I think one of the things, I mean, GPs and primary care definitely have a role to play in this. And if, I mean, I don't know how much GPs and things are aware of what's going on in their local area in terms of people growing food and sharing food and teaching about food. So if there could be, I don't know who would do it, some sort of marketing to actually enable the GPs to know what was what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of schools are starting doing breakfast clubs because some kids aren't getting food, or, you know, for various reasons. You know, I think that sort of thing helps as well, because if they're getting some sort of nutrition to start the day off, and I know that some of them can get lunch monies and stuff like that, but I think, you know, there's a lot of good stuff happening around some breakfast clubs in a lot of schools, and I think that's making a difference in how they learn.
Yeah, because it's that social side of sharing and so on. And speaking of sharing, absolutely. I think we're about to be shared somewhere else. So I think you're all going to disappear shortly. So thank you very much for joining in and really building on that one there. So I really appreciate that, everybody. Thank you so much, and enjoy your next breakout room, wherever you're off to next.
Thanks, Norma.
Thank you. Or if we're all still here, we're going to keep watching Simon's pink notes zooming around the room. So yes, as we are then going to focus on what is that ask to government around these. Okay, we're about to move in 10 seconds. So see you later, ladies, and Simon. Simon, I hope you're coming with me.
I have zero control. I just keep flying around into different rooms. Hi, Alison.
Hi, how you doing?
We're all still here. So.
I think what they've done is forgotten to remove the breakout room timer, so that it gives you an extra.
Regenerative farming practices.
I know very little about it. It just I live in the country, you know.
I was actually watching quite a lot of stuff over COP about farming in Scotland and the borders that was regenerative, and was really interesting.
Yeah, I think people need an incentive to do it though, don't they?
Absolutely. And like you say, see that it can work, and see other people doing it and it working out really well. So that, yeah, I think the more information out there, the better.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our questions. I'm Norma, and I'm a development worker with Angus Tourism Cooperative, and was a founder of the Angus Appetite for Angus Food and Drink Network. I have a strong and keen interest in all things food and drink, whether it be growing, eating, making, and I like trying my hand at something new, and facilitating is something that I'm wanting to learn more about. So that's why I volunteered to come in on this evening. So yeah, but this is where we're at with our so welcome everybody. I hope you've enjoyed your other two breakout rooms so far, and welcome to ours. So here we are with our question: how can a local food plan improve the health and well-being of everyone in Scotland? So we started off by all the ideas in yellow there, and then we've built upon them a little bit with all our green little sticky notes, and now we're really wanting to, you know, focus in on what is it then that we're going to go back to government and ask. What is the ask? You know, what is the wish behind the complaint, if it is a complaint or it's not really a complaint? It's a need and a want for the local food plan to work for the areas that they're there for. So one of the things that we've worked on quite a bit in the last room was access to food. And that generated a lot of chat about how, you know, how simple things like maybe being off sick can really impact on your income, etc. And how do you actually, you know, feed yourself properly? You know, people that may not have the resources, the tools, the knowledge to be able to do that. So what we're looking for now in this session is to have a look at these things in a bit more detail and say what is the ask of government. Or if you're coming in and having a look at this and thinking there's something glaringly obvious that should be in here that's not, please do feel free to pitch in with that as well. So, one of the things that came out about the access to food was, you know, for example, if someone had gone in to visit their GP, you know, at that level, do they know where the local food projects are? Is it about the signposting and education? But you know, how do we actually make it work? What needs to happen for those ideas to be a reality? You can pick any of them. It doesn't need to be the one that we've got highlighted.
I mean, I don't know where this fits in, but I had a conversation on Friday with someone and about access to food and food insecurity. And Alison Goodfellow, you'll know this, but Dundee City Council, because of Scottish Government funding for post-COVID, gives £7,000 to £10,000 worth of food a week. Is that a week or was it a month? A lot of, and then people can claim for fresh food grants. So this will go until the end of March, but then what? You know, there isn't, what happens then if this huge amount of money is being spent on giving food, ambient goods mainly, not necessarily huge amounts of fresh food. What happens to people then? It isn't sustainable, and it's surely a local food plan is about making good food accessible in a sustainable way, long term.
Lily, can I jump in there? Mia? Actually, I'm currently working for Faith in Community Dundee.
It was Jackie I was speaking to. So.
I was going to say it sounds like you've been speaking to Jackie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I work in with Faith in Community Dundee, and we look after the Food Insecurity Network, which is a group of about 25, I think, at the last count, community food projects. That's larders, a community fridge, drop-in cafes, a whole bunch of different things, providing food services for their local communities. And yeah, as Mia mentioned, there's council provision at the minute, and that runs until March. And we're actively looking for ways in which we can support those projects to continue that level of provision. I myself am looking at a strategy around food surplus and food waste. So redistributing the surplus that exists in the market and directing it to be used and to feed people, and also reducing the food waste that exists in general. But the other strands of that we are looking at, particularly things like the cash first approach and cash first basis, so making sure that people, because as again Mia pointed out, long term wise, the greatest barrier to people's food security is having the disposable income to buy the food that they need. So yeah, one of the things that we are working on with Faith and Community is having a cash first basis where we're making sure that people are able to get the support that they need, are in touch with the right services, are able to apply for the right benefits, etc., and referral schemes and things like that, to make sure that they are getting as much monetary support as possible, so that they have that ability to buy food. And then behind that is all the projects as well, who are, like I say, trying to provide community food for everyone. And yeah, so my part in that is the food surplus and food waste strategy.
I don't know how we make it improve the health and well-being of everybody. I mean, no, we sort of the growing and the fresh produce, and then the cooking skills and the growing education. So all of that needs to be part of the local food plan, that people
absolutely
know exactly how to make what they need to make with what they have, and just redistributing any old food to people that don't have the means necessarily isn't going to make them healthier.
So where do you think then that what would that ask be then? What is that, what is the ask there then?
Well, I think I've said it in every single workshop. It is about investing in projects such as the Maxwell Centre, long-term funding that they can work with communities without having to worry that their funding is going to run out. We know that that they work. So to have these hubs across Dundee where they can work within localities and provide education about everything that they need, and also to grow and sustain. So that's part of it, I think, anyway. I don't know what anyone else.
Yeah. And how do you think that would work, and would that work as well in a rural area?
Yeah. I think I think each area will know what works best, but I think the basics of education is there. I mean, it depends it's hard to say, because I think it depends on what the community needs are. I can only really speak for, I work in Dundee, so I used to work in a rural area, and actually, yes, that's what we used to do as well. So yeah, similar.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think the right to food is something that covers everything. Food, regardless of where you live, food should be accessible, it should be adequate, and it should be available. Working in like the Maxwell Centre and the community garden, we know the benefit of the long-term solutions, the cash first approach, learning to grow your own, having the confidence to grow your own, just having affordable access to locally fresh grown produce is so important at grassroots level. And also, working on, like the ending food banks and things like that, because, we're addressing like two problems at the moment. We've got a problem with food waste, and we're using that to tackle food insecurity. And it's, it's the way things are at the moment. But is that right?
No, yeah.
I mean, we collect from supermarkets daily and distribute it. And yes, it's shocking it's going to waste, but it just seems that we're, like using two problems to try and solve each other. I don't know if Ellie's got more thoughts on that.
No, I'm nodding along. Yeah, I always try and talk about it in a short-term and a long-term way, because you're absolutely right. There's surplus over here and deficit over here, so it sort of makes sense in the short run. If we can get food on people's plates, great. I would much rather people who were in a situation where they're unable to afford what they need were getting things that were otherwise going in the bin. That makes sense to me. But you are absolutely right that in the long term, is that really addressing the bigger picture?
Yeah, and that's something that has to come at a sort of like a government, sort of like a law, like human rights level.
Of course, yeah. No, I completely agree. It's like you say, it's higher level, bigger picture thinking that in the long term sense needs to be looked at in some detail.
Yeah, and also following on from what Mia said, it's really important that the projects at the moment that are working hard to address these issues and tackle these issues do have the funding and the recognition of the good work that they're doing.
Absolutely. I like I say, I work with a bunch of different projects, and there's also, you know, not just the food insecurity element of it, but the social element of food, the social value of food and of those community projects. So it's not always just about the food insecurity part, which is obviously incredibly important, but it's also about being part of your community and seeing people that you see every single week, and that value that those community projects add goes, you know, above and beyond the food insecurity level. Just, you know, like I say, despite how vital and important that is, particularly at the minute.
Yeah, because it was mentioned earlier of the, you know, the culture and the heritage and the authenticity of whatever your local food is, whatever, you know, and the different cultures and how they interpret our local food. And the social it is, and how do you measure that social impact of these projects?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that these projects are evaluated. The long-term effect of them are evaluated, and then given the respect that I suppose that they deserve. And it's very difficult to measure impact in such long-term scale, but perhaps that's something that the government should be looking at to show that they work. And then that's when you can show the impact, that's when funding comes as well, because you can say, this is what happens. Let's stop putting it, I mean, I know they keep putting it into the front line. I work in nutrition and dietetics department, and just for example, in the weight management, they keep giving weight management dietitians for people that are over a certain BMI, and no funding going into the prevention of getting people to stay a healthy weight in the first place. And I just like, why? You know, why aren't we looking at the longer term? Why aren't we, you know, working with projects such as Alison, we work with the schools, they work with the growing, you know, all of this is all about the prevention, but it takes too long quite often for governments that are certain, I don't know, 4 years, and they have to show that they've made an impact.
Oh, we only have 1 minute left. Goodness gracious, where did the time go? Yeah, that. I have no idea how that could have passed quite so quickly. But we've got a good. Sorry, Simon wanted to come in.
And I was just going to say, if people could just check, I've just been hammering away on the keyboard and sliding things over. If there's anything that you think shouldn't be there or should be different, then let me know. I'm putting pink as asked to government, that they could be probably grouped together a little bit more, but we can look at that. But if there's anything that's missed or you really would want Scottish Government to know at this point, let me know and we'll put it in.
Everybody happy with what's on there? Yeah, well, thank you very much. Sorry, did someone want to come in? No. Thank you very much for the input in there. I hope everybody wanted to get a chance to speak did so. And thanks for your contribution, and it was nice to meet you virtually. And we'll all have to, I think, decide to click the button so that we can leave our breakout room and get back into the main body of the kirk, as they say in these parts. So thank you very much, everybody, for your input, and we will see you in the next stage. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With question 3. We're starting with question 3. How can a local food plan make the maximum positive impact on our environment and biodiversity. Now, you can see we've got 3 colours of sticky notes. Simon will take your ideas and he will type them up. So we thought we would start with the ideas initially. If you would like to shout out, if you can't shout out, I think there might be a text box, but you could shout out and your idea, and then we'll use a green post-it to take it to the next stage. Well, what does it need to make this happen? And then the pink one is, what do we need to ask government to make this happen? So shall we start with the ideas? First of all, somebody like to give us an idea about what we can do to make a positive impact? I think we've got Alison Anderson in the room. Alison, are you wanting to put something on the board? Oh,
it's quite a difficult one to start with, isn't it, Viv?
Well, I suppose the thing is, how can a local plan make the maximum positive impact on our environment? One of the things we might be thinking about is, what do we grow in our area? And maybe what could we be growing? What should we maybe be doing different that might help our environment and biodiversity?
I mean, for me, a lot of stuff that we get is, you know, like the avocados and all the air miles and stuff. I think if we can move back to like seasonality, you know, so we eat things that are in season instead of wanting asparagus when, you know, it only grows in like a month and a half. And the air miles that it takes to bring all the stuff in is incredible when you start thinking about it. So for me, if we've got a local food plan that's been fully worked up and is robust, everybody can coalesce around that. And I think, you know, if they've got a common purpose, then I think that helps, you know, whereas everybody's trying to do their own thing all over the place. I think if you've got a plan, people know about it and they can work to it, then you know that you're working to help the environment, you know that you're working for biodiversity. So I think that will help if there is something to hang your hat on, I think.
Yeah. Simon, are you able to sort of summarise that in a few short words in a yellow post? Maybe
if I was going to say something similar to Alison, which is maybe just that we don't really understand the seasonality anymore because we're all so used to there being cherry tomatoes in the supermarket whenever we expect it. So I think if we understood more about that seasonality and the local element of that, that might be good.
Do you think, what do you think? Do you think there's also things we need to have a look at that supports different growing and different, you know, do we have the skill sets? Do we have the infrastructure that we need to eat more seasonally? Things like that. What is there anything, other things that we should be looking at?
I know I had quite a bit of work to do when I did the food forum stuff, and I had a visit with Castleton, just outside of Stonehaven. Now they've managed to extend their growing period from like March to, I think it's about November, for like cherries and soft fruits and stuff, and that's with the polytunnels. So there's been lots of research and innovation to actually extend the growing season, but it's still local, it's still grown there, and it's employing people, and that I think is quite good. And Tayside is really up for that, and potentially they are doing that. I'm not sort of connected into the food and drink like I used to be, but I think that again, you know, people can get things that they're looking for that potentially are out of season, but they've lengthened the season because of how they grow it.
I think that's one of the things that's maybe a little bit different between us and other parts of Europe. Is other parts of Europe, you know, they use a lot more greenhouses, glass houses side of things. And you're right, Alison, again, we've got all the expertise locally in terms of with James Hutton Institute, which in terms of varieties, choosing varieties of things and helping to identify varieties that can extend the season. And, you know, we've probably got growers with good experience of how to work these, change the growing methods to extend the season and things. So you're probably right that we happen to be in the middle of all this expertise. So Simon, are you okay with your, I don't know, I'm not seeing any sticky notes, but it's maybe just my screen. Oh,
right. So what, you can't see anything, no?
No, there's nothing coming up.
No,
Is there
no.
anything on your screen at all?
Just the thing with idea, what needs to happen, ask government.
Okay, that's very strange. Let me see what I can do.
I know, I just wondered if you'd left us.
Come on, page 5. Right, I'll stop sharing and share again. See if it comes
It
up.
says page 1 of 2 on our screen.
Yeah.
Right, give me 2 seconds.
Okay. So.
That's better.
Yes, well, that's good.
So you just turn it off and turn it on, fixes it.
I know. So are you all happy? So we've got the eating seasonal produce, extension of growing seasons through technology, more education on what seasonal is. Now, Simon's put up a couple of what happens next. Once it's new growing methods, more use of greenhouses, and yeah, that's great. Anybody else like to add something about what you think we could do to make a positive impact on our environment and biodiversity if we're talking about producing more local food in the area? Do you think we need to change what we grow? Do you think we need to challenge our diets?
Liz, no, Viv, could I come in here,
please?
As Caroline. I think, you know, for me, and I see Liz Fubister's on the call as well, and you know, we're both dietitians. And I think there's something in here about, you know, right back at schools and cooking for, you know, young children, teaching them about, you know, good nutrition, good food, where it comes from. And I think a lot of it is that people don't know how to cook with some foods. So, you know, if you grew something that was in season, such as kale, folk wouldn't have a clue what to do with that. And so probably they don't buy foods like that. They buy foods that, strawberries and raspberries, because they know how to do something with that. So there's something really crucial in and amongst all this around education.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, and I do feel that, you know, we're in the centre of excellence in terms of teaching and education, and I think we could help with that. So yes, I think absolutely teaching. Do you think people want to know more about how their food is produced? You know, do you think, you know, we could have some sort of provenance premium based on sustainable food production, if you know what I mean? They talk about agroecology. Do you think that's another important thing that people need to understand so they can make choices?
I would think that yes, is quite important, but the difficulty would be actually how do you highlight that to people? I know there was talk at COP26 in some of the agricultural sessions about actually having additional labels added to food labels.
Yes.
But food labels already are packed and people don't know how to interpret them. So that may be problematic. But I think it's something that those of us that would be interested in would love to see the provenance and things a bit more.
Yes. It's the balance, because hopefully we're asking people not just to look at where it's from, but it's how it's been produced as well. So I think that's great. Now,
I suppose you've got two audiences there as well, Viv. I mean, if you think about it, some people have, you know, the food poverty, they can't afford really good food and really expensive vegetables, really expensive fruit. So if you're trying to push things to that way, it's going to be really difficult for them to do that. But there are people like me, anything I look for Scottish food, I look for Scottish meat, and I'll buy that above anything else. But that's a choice I can make because I'm actually able to do that. And there's people middle ground that can, you know, they maybe won't want to do that. But I think it's the people at both ends, you know, that you have to decide, you know, where you fit this and how they can access food as easily as the people at the top end that have got plenty of money and they can do what, you know, whatever they choose. It really is a difficult one.
No, which comes out, people will say there's there's structural problems in our food system. There's inequality, and we've got for social justice and things. So, this is maybe the time that we have this conversation about the right to food, and equally, how we value food and how we value how it's produced, and how we can make sure that it isn't exclusive. How we can make this accessible to everybody. So this is, a really good chance to be reflecting back to government about how we can change the system. There's all these things going through consultation just now. Now is a good time to do the joining up. I know that we don't have very much longer in here. You can see we've come up with some really good things. Simon has very kindly been adding what happens next. Now, if anybody would like to add what you want to ask government for any of these topics, please just pitch in.
I think the main one for me would be affordability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think something from my point of view as well would be planning applications, and what food and retail outlets actually appear in deprived areas, and how we can actually change the balance of things like takeaways and whatnot in deprived areas, and have more what shall we say, visible local food producers.
Yeah, that's great. And that is something that government could make a difference on. Anybody else would like to get their ask in just now? We can get it logged.
The government piece for me is the education piece. It's going back to the food teaching within schools, the seasonality that could be taught in schools, the chefs, and they could again only put seasonal goods on. I know that restricts what they do, but there's definitely something around that, I think. But the education piece, I think, is quite important.
Yeah,
definitely.
Anybody else got an opportunity to have their say just now, what we're going to take back to government, how you want to change your food system?
What about if we could give businesses money off their business costs by doing the right thing? So reductions in business rates and things.
Incentivize it. Yeah,
definitely.
Something that something that makes them feel good about what they're doing, the good choices that they're making.
Yes. Well, for me, I think there's something to be said about having respect to everybody involved in the food system. That people get paid properly at every point in the process, but equally, the food remains accessible. So, right, and conscious we're running out of time and I'm speaking too much. Anybody else likes to take something back? We've got 1 minute.
I'm not sure if Healthy Working Lives is still running, but it would be something that would be useful to actually encourage more businesses to look at, and the sort of nutrition component of that is really valuable.
Good. That's great. I think we might get taken back into the next breakout room soon, but I think that's been brilliant. You've been really productive in a short space of time. We've got some strong asks there. And we'll take these with us when we go into the next breakout room, and we'll see if we can get more people to add to them as well. But remember, you'll have a chance to have a say later on, and you can always do your own feedback to the consultation exercise. That's great, Simon. Thank you. That's great. Well, and I hope you enjoy the next 2 sessions that you're going into. We're leaving in 10 seconds.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, make the most of it. This is your chance to have your say. All these things that you're keen to see happening. This is your chance.
Could go under the Healthy Working Lives, could go under education.
Yeah.
I think Simon's going to have a play around with this.
Oh, we've been.
Oh, we moved. Oh,
we've moved. Without. I must have missed my warning of you are now moving somewhere else.
Norma, I don't think we should be in the same room.
No.
No, it's fine, because what will happen is Viv and I will get moved out to another room.
Get going.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Right, here we go, Viv.
Hi.
We're the ones that get moved.
We've been moved. Hi, everybody. And I see some, oh, hello, some lovely friendly faces. Right. I hope we haven't used up all your good ideas already. So Simon and I are looking after question 3, and it's how can a local food plan make the maximum positive impact on our environment and biodiversity? So our conversations are a bit around what we grow and how we grow it and how we make it accessible to all. So we had quite a good chat in the last breakout room, and you can see the ideas in yellow. There was a bit of chat about education, about how people understand agroecology, about how their food is produced. There was again a chat about skills, people actually knowing what to do with seasonal produce. There was a feeling we should be eating more seasonal produce. We need to think about how we can make this local food more available, make it more accessible, and how we might extend the growing seasons through technology. Maybe looking to Europe for examples where they've used greenhouses and to extend their seasons. So you can have a few minutes to have a look at what we've got so far. Do any of you have any new ideas that you'd like to add to the ones that we've got already?
Reduction in chemicals.
Okay. Now that's great.
Will have a big impact on biodiversity, as will less intensive production.
Okay.
I'm thinking about buying in bees for polytunnels for pollinating strawberries.
Yeah. Is there anything do you think we should be changing what we're growing? Do you think we need to look at growing more pulses and changing what we're eating? Or do you think that we should be looking at smaller scale production? Any thoughts about that?
Well, as you know, Viv, I'm very community garden orientated, and I think, extending community growing across the city in lots of different spaces is great, but it's not a solution. But I just wonder, of all the land locally that isn't used for food production, that's used in the production of barley, that's like a wasted opportunity, I think, to be growing local affordable food that would have very little food miles to get into Tayside and Angus, well, Dundee and Angus.
Yes. Do you think we should be looking at the productive capacity of our area?
Yeah, I think, there's lots of opportunity to extend community growing. I mean, I know that there's 3 of us here that are very involved in Camper Down, and that addresses not just the actual growing of the produce, but the education behind it. I mean, if you teach someone how to grow their own fruit and vegetables, that's a skill for life. It gives them the confidence and the knowledge. And I think just by teaching people how to grow brings in all the seasonable side of produce and the local, what's available, what you can grow. And you can't grow bananas, but we've got lots of local, fresh, soft fruit. It's seasonal.
Absolutely. And I think it's helping people understand that a wonky apple with a bit of a chunk out of it is actually still okay to eat. It doesn't have to be perfect and red and shiny.
Yeah.
What about, I read something recently about scale and scalability, and talking about using networks to upscale. You were saying, Alison, that community growing projects have a certain amount of capacity, but how do you scale it up? Have you got any thoughts about different options for scaling up production?
making more land available. I mean, give everyone the right, you know, like to be able to grow their own.
Do you have any thoughts about about the models at all, the structures for doing that? I suppose it'd be a green sticky. Who would do it? How would we do it?
I wrestle with this a bit, because I think, what's the point in growing lots of potatoes when there's potato fields right on our doorstep who grow upscale potato production to the nth degree? Same with like brassicas and things like that. Is it better concentrating on the things that are more kind of labour intensive and higher profit for local communities, like, I don't know, leaves and salad crops or whatever? I mean, I'm not an expert, but it strikes me that it's not worth trying to grow half a hectare of potatoes when there's a field next door that's growing 4 hectares of potatoes. And it's having a better connection with those that do have that big scaling up, and that produce coming directly into the city or to communities. And community growing, actually producing, I don't know, courgettes or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and community growing and community gardens, it's opportunity to grow like a wide, diverse range of different things, like edible flowers, which are good for the environment, good for biodiversity, and you can incorporate them in all your cooking classes and all your education and training workshops and things. So yeah, perhaps it should be the variety of different crops that you can grow, rather than just focusing on your core potatoes, carrots.
And again, it's dealing with the gluts of produce. I've just carted out big huge barrow load of potatoes home with me yesterday, and I'm thinking there's no way that I can get through it all, but we have in Canusi, so we've got a food is free, and that's a great model for distributing excess produce to local community. And Alison, you'll be aware of other people in Dundee as well.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's really working hard to make the food, you know, like accessible to everyone when it's ready.
And I also think that, you know, we don't need to buy as much. So if you're buying in a supermarket, very often people will throw away a lot of fresh. We buy too much. There's sort of, you know, it's in huge packets. So if you're able to buy a smaller amount, or get it sort of from the farmer, that it's sort of in an intermediate way where you're getting just what you need, and you're less worried about it going off, because obviously carrots go off in my house when they start to sort of turn to liquid. Because I wouldn't throw it away. So, you know, there's this sort of buy what you need, eat what you don't buy huge amounts. We don't need huge amounts. It's sort of, I don't actually quite know what I'm trying to say, but if we threw less away, this sort of reduces food waste, then we might not need to produce quite so much as we think, because we're actually not consuming as much.
You're absolutely spot on. Yeah. Right, we've got sort of a little bit of time. This is our chance to ask the government, what do you want? I know that you all have things that you want to ask the government for change in terms of our environment and diversity in our food production. What do you want to ask?
The one I would ask, kind of similar to the food teaching within schools, but if you think about prisons, you know, we talk about rehabilitating people, and I think it's not a great opportunity to educate on things, not just on the side of food, but actually things that will rehabilitate, you know, offenders to come out and actually be able to give something back as well. And I do think there's an opportunity there, you know, for both sides, for us to be able to do something like that.
Yeah, it's not just prisons, it's work, what are they called? The criminal justice service. They're a great help to us in Dundee, actually coming out and doing stuff. And I have thought of trying to use them as some kind of distribution network for people to get to take food, food all over the place. But I don't know whether
the St Andrews Environmental Network, Alison. They've got the St Andrews Environmental Network. They've got a clean and green team. You should go and see how that's set up.
What, in Perth?
No, in St Andrews.
In St Andrews, they've got something similar in Perth.
Right, come on, this is your chance to ask the government. What
Well, I think the Scottish Government should be investing and providing funding for all these initiatives.
Long-term funding, funding, core funding.
And revenue funding?
Just core funding to help people, initiatives out like Alison's keep going without scrabbling around looking for funding every 5 minutes.
Yeah, because a lot of, like projects like ours spend a ridiculous amount of time looking for funding and reporting. We can demonstrate the job we role, the impact we have, the benefit we had. Why can't we just get long-term money to get on with it?
Yeah, I agree. The funding's too reactive. We need to be really brave about spending real investment into projects and people that are working within this sort of, I suppose, public health type, environmental health, and it's long term, and you see the effects long term, so you can't fund it short term, because it doesn't work. I mean, it's too short-sighted, really. I mean, you need to invest in it and be brave and invest in it.
I mean, I don't know if this is true or whatever, but I heard a number of years ago that the tatty farmers throw a hell of a lot away because they don't fit the potatoes aren't perfect or whatever. And I don't know whether. I don't know if the situation has changed, but I just feel that there must be quite a lot of waste at the farmer's end that of perfectly good food, and whether that's kind of, it's because it's regulated too much or environment, I don't know.
The other one I would quite like to ask is, you talk about city centre regeneration. Why can we not look at urban markets?
Yeah.
Small independent retailers which are funded, whether that's through business rates being reduced.
Yep.
Again, the ability, I think it ties in me with what you're saying about going and buying a pack of 53 bananas when you only need one. I think if we can go and pick something up on the way home, and then there's a double win there. I think the government, that'd be something I'd love to see what they would say to that.
Right. I mean, do in terms of the environment, and we're thinking slightly different here. Do farmers and with the common agricultural policy, they're going to need some incentive to either have a lower yield, if that is what happens, if they use less chemicals. Or education as to sharing, people that are doing it, that are producing and making money out of environmentally friendly way of farming, and to have that kind of network, and it may already happen, but there needs to be an incentive, sort of rewilding, looking at different ways of we chopped down all the trees up in the Highlands, and there were forests up there, and now very little grows, and a lot of it's used for shooting, and are there other ways and other incentives that people can actually earn a living from maximising biodiversity, rather than it just be us thinking about vegetables.
This is your opportunity to make these asks. As Simon said, they're looking at post-cap for production. This is your chance to rethink the system and rethink what we reward in terms of production.
I mean, a lot of farms, their crops are right to the edge, and I know this because I walk and ride around the fields, but actually by leaving that strip, creates the, you know, those wildflowers. But if you're farming intensely right up to the edge, you don't leave that sort of space for, oh, and watch something about having just a strip of wildflowers, and then the amount of bees that were there and the amount of more pollination. I mean, I am no farmer, but that seems to be.
Yeah. Do you think we need to provide new training and things for farmers, new skills, that side of things? Do you think? What do you think?
Well, I think they just, yeah, or if they need it, or this is an incentive, this is what happens when we did it, and why don't you do it on one field and see what happens, you know, and here's, if you lose, well, I don't know, I mean, I really don't know, but if you get a grant to do it for 1 year to just show what happens when you do.
So giving them some sort of reassurance that it's worth changing.
It's worth changing.
Yes.
Yeah. Or you have pilot projects that people sign up to do pilot, you know, and then share it.
Yeah. And do you think they need to have to look at the infrastructure they need in terms of breaking down commodities?
It's our final question.
Maybe we haven't got a new facilitator.
Oh,
hello, right, you'll have Viv and I for this one.
Hi.
It's us.
Last but not least.
Of course. Well, this is good. So we've got quite a busy board, but there's room for more. You'll see that our question is, how can a local food plan for Scotland make the maximum positive impact on both our environment and biodiversity? You can see the yellow stickies where we've had chats about reduction of the use of chemicals, a bit more education about how food's produced, teaching people not to buy too much in the first place, teaching them about cooking skills, encouraging more use of seasonal produce, making more local food more accessible, helping train up the farmers in the period of transition. We could extend the growing season through technology, and we can extend community growing across the city, increasing production of capacity in the local area and scaling up some local growing opportunities. So that were some of the ideas. We had some ideas of the how-to, and we have quite a few pinks of what we want the government to do about these things. Please feel free. Are there any ideas, things that we've not covered here that you would like to see in terms of an idea about how we can make a maximum positive impact on our environment and biodiversity when we're looking at local food production?
If I'm having trouble reading those small ones, the smaller pink ones.
Yes.
Maybe it's just me.
No.
Ooh, that's better.
We've had some quite interesting things about health, about helping pay for the transition from one mode to another, looking at how we might encourage more urban access to food.
Well, yeah, I would say like community supported agriculture will in theory will raise a lot more food per acre. But obviously the big cost that is avoided by having more industrial agriculture is time, people's time. Yeah, and community supported agriculture generally has a much better footprint for the environment and permaculture and such.
So if we wanted to have more community supported agriculture, what would need to happen? How do we do this?
It's one is finding access to land. Land is prohibitively expensive and generally sold in huge chunks to those who already have some. Yeah, because I've just been looking at that round here, you know. Yeah.
Well, this is your chance for a pick.
It's my chance. So
what could the government do then? What could the government do to help with that?
I think, well, now Kate had better knowledge of what government should do, I think, on land reform.
I think it has to be legislated. If land has to be managed appropriately for everything, for the climate emergency, for emissions, for carbon capture, and for biodiversity. You know, everybody's declared the emergency. We know now we're in an emergency situation, and land use is huge. If they start legislating that land management has to be appropriate for all those things, then people have to stop growing enormous, massive fields of barley that are just going to go and produce whiskey that's just going to be exported.
Yeah.
And it'll all get sprayed with glyphosate, you know, and it's just massacring everything.
Yeah, 80% of all the cereals grown
is barley for alcohol. Food. Yeah.
Animal food or whiskey. It's insane, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, and it's very hard for communities to break into that in any sense. You know, the council at the moment are having difficulty finding 2 small sites per town in Angus to support for more food growing. But really, actually, a community growing is more efficient than even allotments or whatever. Yeah.
Can I maybe come in about, I used to work somewhere that had well, obviously all the local authorities have a planning authority. Whether there's, you know, just now, I think they have to like give money back that puts into, I don't know, makes a play park for so many households, and if it's a primary school for so many houses that they build and everything. I mean, something in the planning legislation that would mean they would have to give up for allotments, or they have to give up for doing some sort of biodiversity stuff, maybe.
That'd be interesting. Yeah,
that is meant to be in the new national planning framework 4, I think it is, that's meant to be coming out next year. But it's being so slow, and you know, the developers are all just piling in there with new builds before all these quite draconian restrictions are going to come in. So yes, community growing is apparently going to be built into that planning framework, so I'm told.
And the other one is obviously farmers, and they get paid for what they grow and things like that. I suppose it's actually looking at what they get paid for, and whether they do need to put more hedgerows back, or so that actually, because obviously they've got to make a living as well. So it's just what would actually be the incentive for them to do much more on the biodiversity stuff.
I think the more we keep relying on the system as it is, the more we just go down the road to ruin. And if we're sticking with that kind of the capitalist incentivizing with money, I think it's just, you know, it's sticking with business as usual, and it's not addressing the emergency at hand. I think we do have to change the system. We have to look at the whole system.
Yeah, I would totally agree, because I think 80% of the money goes to the biggest farmers at the moment, and if we're just going to carry on with that, the real reform will not happen.
Yeah. And it's, you know, this is really serious. Now we know that finally even the politicians are actually telling the truth.
So what do we need to do? What do we need to do? How do we do this?
We need
we need land available all over the country in small parcels for small scale community agriculture.
And Kate, how do we need to give this new generation of growers, how do we educate them? How do we train them? Is there a gap there?
There's a huge gap, I would say. We've got, I mean, it's amazing who already there are growers who are trying to do this stuff, smallholders and individuals who are doing it off their own back because they know it's the right thing to do, but there is not much there to encourage them.
Yes. So what do they need? What can we do to make that work?
I think the way the Campy Growers is going to be set up, where people can turn up and they can volunteer and they can help out, so they're actually working alongside people who already know what to do. So they're learning as they're going and they're doing something practical. You know, so many of the horticulture courses and that kind of thing are set up to get people into producing bedding and that kind of stuff. It's all part of the same old system that is business as usual, that's not really going to help. And that kind of formal education doesn't really empower people to do it themselves. So I think that
change the education. Do we change, or you're suggesting a different way of learning? What?
Well, we've for Sustainable Kerry, we with the council produced the Community Growing Award, which anyone can learn how to grow food on a scale at home, and that is available. It's going to be rolled out across the whole of Angus, so anyone can do that. I think it's also about supporting growers in some way, and you do need people to be paid. You know, it's all right saying volunteers. You cannot rely on volunteers to grow all your food.
Yeah, exactly.
We're getting near to it now. So, Angus, Kate, what do we do? How do we pay? You know, where does it fit in? Do we? I don't know.
Well, it should be. Well, the other thing that I've noticed in a lot of these growing, it's one or two people working at it, so they're often very unsupported in their own, and they're vulnerable in that way if certain things happen on a small scale. So you need, I think it is looking at the whole system of community supported agriculture, so that there is a kind of a backup.
Is that a government ask?
Yes, I think so. I think so. The Land Workers Alliance must have, I don't know what footprint they have in Scotland, but they will know what is working across Europe, and let me guess, it's not going to be that different here.
So maybe things that we can learn from Europe then, yeah?
Yeah, small scale. I mean, there's a lot of it happening, and they're being amazingly productive. There's farms that I've looked at in Sweden, you know, and they turn a profit, but their whole management system is different. So they may be local people buy in for the year, they pay a fee for the year, and they get veg or whatever, you know. So it is. We would have to look into works here. I don't know if people would do that.
No,
it helps keep it even out. So instead of the growers, everything is risked on the 3 months, you know, in the summer, they get a constant income through the year by having sort of community shareholders, I suppose. So it is a totally different system.
But then government needs to take that on as well, don't they?
So what do they do, Kate? Tell me, what do we need from government for this?
I think they actually subsidise community growing.
Okay, there you go,
projects.
And ask.
You know, they actually, rather than, I've always thought this is ridiculously inefficient, rather than these individual organisations trawling around for grant money that's available and spending hours and hours filling in grant applications and maybe getting it and maybe not, and losing good staff because it's so unstable. The government needs to identify you should have 5 community gardens of this size in order to provide enough food for those people, and there's the money, and that's paying that number of people to do it. You know, if they're going to have to invest trillions of pounds in solving the climate emergency, we're cheap. You know, we don't cost that much. And it has a massive impact.
And I mean, if you look at Locavore in Glasgow, that started out using big gardens on the south side of Glasgow, and they've become, it seems to have got too big now. They've got 90 shops or something, but yeah, it's become very successful, and that is very similar kind of model, isn't it? They've got 3 or 4 acres of ground, you know, it's not huge.
Now, the way this is set up, I can't see if anybody's got their hand up. Is there anybody like to add anything to this sticky board before we get closed down? Anything else? This is your chance. This is your big ask.
Be about biodiversity. Just realised.
Would you like to add something?
My big bugbear is pre-harvest glyphosate, and that apart from anything else, all the other things around pesticides and that kind of thing, the pre-harvest treatment with glyphosate has to be banned.
Okay, that's an ask. There you go, there's a pink.
Yes, and pre-sowing, isn't it?
Well, pre-sowing is not so drastic.
Okay.
Because it's not, I mean, yes, of course, but you know, the pre-harvest spray that they do 2 weeks beforehand, and they kill the crop, and then everything is absolutely covered in glyphosate, and then people are expected to eat it.
Now, Simon, do you need a spelling of glyphosate?
You can spell glyphosate.
You can spell it for us, Kate.
Yeah, GLYPHOSATE, I think. Is that right?
Okay. There you go.
Roundup, as it's known in the, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And Angus Council are just about to do a consultation on spraying.
Oh.
So, yeah, spraying and mowing regimes for biodiversity.
Good.
So that's.
Well, they haven't closed us down yet. If you've got anything else you'd like to stick on the board, this is your chance.
Yeah, well, there's something, I don't know how we do it. I've been trying to work it out. Well, we're just starting a community, so collecting local tree seedlings and growing them on, and yeah, community saplings and all that stuff. How do we get the trees in the right place? I've no idea. That's got a big impact for biodiversity. I don't know what the ask is.
Like foraging areas.
Needing
to be included
is there
in the
a way
local
of
food
zoning? Yeah, I don't know.
There's a good pink one, Simon. Zoning foraging areas.
Oh yes. Yeah. And the whole thing with biodiversity is we can get a lot of winning if we look at connecting what's there.
Yes.
So I think governments can help with that.
Do you mean like physically connecting, like green corridors?
Yeah. So we're starting to do it here with bug life. So looking at pollinator routes, the Strathmore bee line it's called. So looking at everything within a zone of however wide, 2 kilometres, and saying, right, what is good for pollinators that's here? How can we support it better? Yeah, that kind of stuff. But it's all it feels quite in its infancy, as ever, too far behind.
Well, we've got it in pink and black, so it's been noted.
Oh God.
Now, I don't know about you guys, I've got something that says leave breakout room. Do you have that?
Yes.
Yes. I think we might.
Relax.
We're not finished yet. We're not, no, we're not finished yet. Thank you everybody for populating all this. I think it's great. And thank you so much, Simon, for all your typing and spelling and colour coding. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, I hope that you found that interesting. Certainly, I had some really interesting chats and some drilled down to some asks of Scottish Government in our room on health and wellbeing. I'm looking forward to seeing what the other groups came up with. So brilliant. So we've done that. So we've sat down and we've thought about these three key questions. Just as we wrap up, and I'm just aware of the time we've got. Okay, we said we would finish within by 7:30ish, but we'll keep going if people are happy to do that. And what we're going to do is, again, like we did before, we're going to use Mentimeter. It's the final time we're going to do that. So if you've not come in before, please use your phones, go to menti.com and enter that code. And what we've done is, from other workshops and some of the sort of more national thinking through the Sustainable Food Places Network and Nourish itself, and speaking with Scottish Government and looking at what kind of needs to happen, we've had a conversation with Angus and with Dundee and come up with a list of some of the key asks that may or may not be in your top key asks. I'm going to share my screen now, if I can, where that's gone. I'll share that. And I'm going to show you what these key asks were. Okay, so the 7 there, these are the key asks that have come almost at a national level. So what we'd like you to do is have a look at those and use your phone to rank them for you personally, what you think out of these 7 would be the most important. Now, these will all start shifting around as you start looking at the asks. And now, not to say that these are the things that are necessarily the most important to you. These are the things that have come out of conversations. We've got strengthening the role of local authorities and food partnerships. The idea being that actually, if there's going to be a local food strategy, then who's going to have to deliver that? And that will be local authorities. There will be food partnerships, and they need to be adequately resourced. And so perhaps one way of doing that is when we look at the reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, that some money should be put aside to help local authorities to deliver on this. The other one that's on there is around ensuring the Good Food Nation Bill recognises the role of local food. So if we are going to look at how we deliver food, good food to anyone, irrespective of where they live or how much money they have, then local food should play a part in that. One of the others is around the promotion and support of nature-friendly farming techniques. So agroecological techniques are one of those. So, but we're talking about the way we produce food that isn't damaging to our environment and biodiversity, incredibly important when we're in climate and biodiversity emergencies. Linking from that is formally linking the food and the climate agendas. We talk about climate change over here, and then we talk about food over here, where actually, food produces, a third of our greenhouse gas emissions. And how do we link those things together so that when we're looking at how we take action to reduce our impacts and go to net zero and fulfill our climate change commitments that we have in Scotland, food must make, take a really big part of that. Encourage the diversification of agricultural production in line with nutritional needs of Scottish Government. And that's a big kind of sentence, isn't it? But what we're looking at is, in Scotland, we grow more vegetables and more food for animals than we do for the people that are in Scotland. We have huge swathes of land that are used for barley, for the whisky industry. Now, we're not saying we shouldn't have the whisky industry. That's really important for our food tourism. But just like balancing out a little bit, that if we want to feed the people that are in Scotland, then we need to actually probably be planting more food that people can eat and not just drink, however pleasurable that might be. And the other one is around the exploration of dynamic procurement solutions. And so for people who aren't familiar to that, that's around how you allow smaller producers to get into the public procurement, into the contracts. So how do we get food to level up the gluts and the gaps of our food production in Scotland? Because it's, in certain places we grow lots of vegetables, and certain places we don't. We have lots of animals. So we've asked people just to kind of think about this and rank them. Okay, so, and this final one, which seems to be at the top there, which is to develop the true 20-minute neighbourhoods to ensure healthy and affordable food is available for everyone. So this is interesting. So actually in the consultation, when it talks about 20 minutes, it actually says 800 yards, the ability to walk within 800 yards. Now, no matter how much of a utopian situation you think there might be, we're probably never going to have a situation where we've got local food within 800 yards of where everybody lives, because we don't live in that kind of sort of geography. So when I asked Scottish Government why that they asked about 800 yards and walking, when actually when we think about 20-minute neighbourhoods, we're talking about people using public transport or cycling or even using their car, depending where they are. It was because they didn't want to confuse people. So they put this in here because it would, just kind of bracket it off. But when we talk about true 20-minute neighbours, we're talking about our ability to, no matter who we are, what access issues we may have, that we're able to, the principle being that we're able to access good food within an area that doesn't mean we have to do huge journeys in order to get that. And it may be something really quite creative in terms of how we use regional food hubs or community food hubs in order to access that. Well, that seems to have come up on top, which is good. Good Food Nation Bill recognises the role of local food. Oh, things are moving around a bit. Okay, so number one now is coming around the idea of how we get food to people through regional food hubs and procurement. Formula linking food and climate agendas is down there. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so these are just some ideas. So I'd just like to invite everybody, and I'll stop sharing my screen now, but you'll still be able to add to this and it will still be logged and registered. But anybody in the room who's got something that they think should be a part of a local food strategy for Angus and Dundee or Tayside that isn't up there? Is there anything specific and very local you'd like to add to this conversation that will be recorded and given to Scottish Government? Is there anything there that anybody would like to add?
I think one of the most important things is that there is a massive diversification of the kind of crops that are grown in the local area. So within a sensible distance from the city, there needs to be really a lot of different stuff grown, because the climate shocks are going to start coming, the storms are going to start coming, lots of things will fail. And in order to buffer and offer resilience against those shocks, we need that diversity. And it shortens the supply chains as well. You actually only need a radius of about 10 kilometres to produce enough fresh veg for the whole entire city. So why would you be shipping it in from somewhere else? I think diversification of crops local to the city is really important.
Great. So that's diversification of crops within within the surrounding areas of a particular place. But then that's also the if I'm hearing you correctly, is about the ability to shorten those supply chains and get that food to people as well, Kate. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Anything else from anyone? Or did we actually hit it on the nail with those 7?
I suppose I'm thinking what is the way of connecting producers with the city in that way? So say lots of this stuff is grown in Angus. What is the shortest, most simple way of connecting? Because I've spoken to some local producers and they're still saying it's really hard to get food either into local schools, you know, into working with Tayside contracts, or to supply local markets. You know, at the moment our whole system is rigged up to use food that comes a long way. So what is the mechanism to, because a lot of producers would welcome a simpler supply chain. But I'm not really giving you an answer, I'm afraid.
No, you are in a way. It's like, what are the changes that need to happen? Because actually, fundamentally, it's an integrated food system. You know, we can't just have these as a silo. We grow some food and then we process some food and we eat some food. It's all interconnected. Just on that, did anybody have any conversations or anything to add around how we might reduce our inputs? So we know the kind of food we like to eat, and we know the kind of food we can grow in Scotland currently without, you know, using the aid of anything else. Did anything come up that people might want to share from the eating and growing? That was the first question, about how we might sort of extend growing seasons, or sort of get some more of the veg that we would normally import from Europe.
Simon, it's Caroline Mackenzie here. I just wondered if I could come in just based on the last person's comment.
Of course.
I think this is about procurement. I think it's very, you know, I work in NHS Tayside, and we have to procure our food through national procurement, which to some extent means that we're not buying local produce. We're buying from some within Scotland, particularly, you know, our dairy and our meat. That produce tends to come from Scotland, but some stuff does come from, you know, the bigger suppliers, and that could be, you know, across the country and wider. What I'm very aware of is that the procurement process is not straightforward. And I know that Viv has tapped in with one of my colleagues, Lorraine Hartley from National Procurement. It's a complicated process. It means jumping through a lot of hoops. You know, a lot of information has to be provided by companies. It then goes out to tender, and that tender's awarded. And I don't know all the ins and outs. Lorraine would be in a far better position to explain that, and I know she's not on the call tonight. But I think all those hoops make it very, very difficult for local producers to actually be able to provide Tayside contracts, NHS Tayside, with the food that we require, because there's a clear requirement for us that we need nutritional information, allergen information, food safety information, and various other categories of things. And these small local producers don't have time and capacity to do that. So that's not come out in any of the conversations that we've had. But I think there's something about, you know, looking at the whole procurement process and how can that be made in such a way that smaller producers can actually get in with a chance of supplying public bodies.
I think you're right, and I would echo those conversations, the frustrations even with colleagues at Scotland Excel, who were pulling these contracts together, saying we want to do more, but we're kind of bound because we need to have consistency of supply, etc. And I think that's where the ideas of dynamic procurement, where you can pull suppliers in as and when they're needed as well, and depend on the seasonality and what they have, could be one of the ways to look.
Simon,
I think one of the things, just to finally add, I think what's happening in the world at the moment around, Brexit, the lack of HGV drivers, and various other sort of issues is meaning that the supply chain actually at the moment is not terribly secure, and an awful lot of produce at the moment that's coming from these bigger retailers is just no longer available. And so is there now time and scope is now the opportunity and the time to tap into smaller local producers, because maybe they can do something around more secure sort of provision of food and fluid to these sorts of environments.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm going to go to Alison, and then I've seen Jackie's had a hand up. Sorry, I didn't notice you before. I didn't have that view on. Alison?
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, I was just wondering whether there's something that you could do locally, because is there an industry that does well in procurement, like sort of construction, for example, where they know how to play the game, the tier ones, the tier twos, and everybody kind of understands where they fit into that? Because there will be some tiny businesses in the construction industry that will never try and actually sell into the local authority, but they know where they fit in the chain. And I wonder if we could use the skills of those people that have learned how to play the tender game in construction or another industry and take that into the food industry.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Jackie, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so mine's probably around the procurement as well, because I'm really conscious of exactly what Caroline's saying, is that we in the college would love to use our local, much more local produce, but actually because they're not on frameworks, they don't want to comply with the tender process and everything like that. But so I wonder if there is almost like an accreditation that people could get, so that would then feed into your thinking about the dynamic procurement. So actually you're just an accredited person, but actually maybe you're not, you're not whatever your cauliflowers aren't going to be ready until October or whatever, and we just know that that's going to be there and available at that time, and you can just go and buy them, and actually get into deals there. But the other thing I think that's probably really important in the food industry is actually the living wage for people that work in that industry. And I would imagine, when we're dealing with procurement in the college, the reason why people are on frameworks is they've already proven that they're not paying below the minimum wage, and that that there's no modern slavery there. So there's a lot of hoops that people go through to get on these frameworks, which are the right hoops to go through. So, but I do wonder whether there's something here about trying to make sure that people that work in the food industry, the food producing industry, actually do get paid a proper living wage.
I think that's really key, and I think we noted that on one of our jam boards. And I was making notes, but I encapsulated it as ensuring that the people who grow, cook, prepare, serve food are nourished just as much as the people who eat the food themselves. That's super important, because it's not, we can't continue to silo this. Does anybody have anything else to like? I'm just very aware of time and the fact it's Monday and you've all had a weekend, and some Mondays are always tricky, right? Well, they are for me. Is anybody would like to bring anything in that we haven't covered already? I mean, I would say that if anybody's had any thoughts after this, you're lying awake in the middle of the night, you're thinking, oh, I wish I'd said that, then please do send it through, because we're going to be reporting back to Scottish Government next week. So there's still time to add bits and bobs to it. I would just say, just to wrap things up, I'd really encourage everybody who's done there to do, complete a consultation response yourself. I think that certainly Nourish, we've done our own consultation response. We're going to be making that public on the 18th, because that's when our workshop's finished, because we didn't want to be seen to be biasing anybody in a particular direction. We'll make that public. Yeah, do that. Obviously think that the other consultations are happening at the minute, the Endonesia Food Bank and the agricultural transition. Sometimes I think they're doing consultations just to keep us all busy. But anyway, they're out there, and so we sort of need to respond to them. The deadline has been extended to the 2nd of December. So thanks, everyone. Really interesting conversations, I'm going to call the meeting to a close, if that's okay. But could I just ask the sort of facilitator team, could we just have like 2 minutes for a check-in afterwards, just to make sure everyone's all right?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Have a nice evening.